Dummy baddie in tight athletic wear sweats through an intense late-night workout, completely unaware of the eyes watching her from the second-floor window. Up in his room, her brother-in-law looks down at her, believing he knows the real reason she goes out to skip rope every single night. While she claims she is merely dieting, the gremlin finds this to be a poor excuse, noting that she continues this exhausting routine even after returning from a long run. As he watches her jump, he concludes that she simply cannot stand the loneliness of a long night by herself. Leaning against the window frame, our monkey is filled with a sense of longing as his mind drifts back to the day his military service ended. His older brother Sejun had come to visit him at the base, bringing along a stunning woman and introducing her as his new sister-in-law. Hearing her friendly greeting and learning that she already knew so much about him made his heart race instantly, leading to the sudden realization that he had just met his absolute ideal woman. Unfortunately for him, his dream woman was already married to his own brother, leaving him to sigh in defeat. Back in the present, he watches her dry her face with a towel and wishes with a heavy sigh that he could be the one by her side. He can only watch in silence as she finishes her workout and walks back toward the house, leaving him wishing his brother was not his family. The next morning brings bright sunshine and the persistent ringing of a cell phone, waking the young man from his deep slumber. He groggily sits up in bed, rubbing his head and realizing he probably stayed up far too late, staring out the window like an idiot. Deciding that a quick shower is exactly what he needs to wake up, he lazily wanders down the stairs and heads straight for the bathroom. He carelessly swings the door open without bothering to knock, only to freeze in absolute horror upon seeing his sister-in-law standing there in her workout clothes. Both of them are completely paralyzed by the sudden intrusion, with him blundering out a panicked exclamation while she gasps in sheer shock. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she quickly slams the door shut, leaving him standing in the hallway to contemplate his dumb mistake. As he stands outside the closed door with his heart hammering against his chest, he wonders why she was even using this particular bathroom when she normally has her own private one in her bedroom. Despite his confusion and embarrassment, his silly mind cannot help but dwell on how incredible her gym physique looked, making it impossible for him to focus on anything else. A moment later, the door slowly creaks open to reveal his sister-in-law, now fully dressed in a casual top and a long floral skirt. Looking incredibly flustered, she sheepishly apologizes for the misunderstanding, explaining that she only used his bathroom because the boiler in her own room was currently broken. Seung frantically waves his hands to reassure his sister-in-law, insisting that he should be the one apologizing for barging in so carelessly. She smiles warmly and tells him that it is perfectly fine, suggesting that they should just forget about the whole incident since they are family now. Seung sheepishly scratches his ear, feeling a strange twinge of disappointment at the word family. She then announces that she will start preparing breakfast and promises to call him once the food is ready, prompting him to agree quietly. As he watches her walk away into the kitchen, the young man realizes that, as expected, he is nothing more than family to her. Soon after, she ties a pink apron around her waist and gets to work in the kitchen. Seung sits down at the dining table with his older brother Sejun to eat the breakfast she prepared. Looking down at the spread of eel, mushrooms, and vegetables, Seung silently notes that they are eating an incredibly healthy meal for this early in the morning. His sister-in-law leans over the counter and voices her concern to Sejun, stating that his body seems to be feeling quite weak lately and asking if he is doing all right. Sejun immediately dismisses her worries and directs the attention to his younger brother, suggesting she look after Seung instead, since his face has been looking much skinnier recently. Seung is mildly annoyed by this, wondering why his brother is shifting the focus to him when he is perfectly healthy. When she proposes making a tonic for both of them to prepare for the upcoming summer, Sejun flatly declines, claiming he is already healthy enough. He then points out that her eyes have become cloudy and her complexion seems off, asking if she wants him to send her to the hospital again. The sister-in-law freezes at his words, visibly hurt by the harsh suggestion. Seung immediately recognizes that they are referring to the doctor, which is an incredibly sussy topic for his struggling sister-in-law. His brother tries to soften the blow by stating that he is just worried about her, reminding her that they can still live a perfectly good life, even without children, and pointing out that she is only stressing herself out. She looks down in silence before admitting that she has indeed been far too stressed about the whole matter, which Sejun confirms, noting she has been too sensitive lately. Sitting between them, Seung eats his food in silence, finding the heavy atmosphere incredibly uncomfortable. Having finished his meal, he stands up from the table, prompting his brother to ask if he is already done eating. Seung confirms this, explaining that he needs to head out to the bookstore now. He heads to his room and changes into a dark button-up shirt, reflecting on how his sister-in-law is struggling to get a new family member due to his brother's lack of endurance training. After years of unsuccessful efforts, Seung's brother seems to have grown tired of the entire situation, leaving his poor sister-in-law to fret and worry all by herself. Seung soon arrives at his shop, named Seung's Bookstore, and settles in behind the front desk to read. A sudden chime of the entrance bell breaks the silence, and he looks up to deliver his standard welcoming greeting to the customer. He is pleasantly surprised to see his sister-in-law walking through the door, carrying a tiered lunchbox and cheerfully addressing him as the manager. Seung playfully begs her to stop calling him manager, thanking her for going out of her way to bring him food once again. She giggles and insists on the title since he is indeed the manager, announcing that she has brought him some homemade kimbap. She leans over the counter and asks if he likes kimbap, which immediately flusters the idiot as he tries to keep his eyes from wandering. He looks down at the beautifully arranged pieces of kimbap, which she humbly mentions she prepared all by herself. Our monkey boy genuinely praises her work, commenting on how delicious it looks, while she encourages him to hurry up and eat before it gets cold. Feeling a little guilty that she came all this way just to deliver a lunchbox, Seung scratches his head and remarks that this is a bit too much food for just one person. He then looks up at her and asks if she would like to join him and eat together if she is hungry, leaving his sister-in-law staring at him in surprise as her own heart begins to beat rapidly. Hearing Seung's warm invitation, his sister-in-law blushes slightly and agrees to eat a little bit of the food with him. The idiot happily digs in until there is only one single piece of kimbap left in the container, leaning back with a sigh of satisfaction as he declares himself completely full. His sister-in-law giggles at his dramatic display, teasingly pointing out that he barely ate anything and that his stomach is not even showing. Seung can only chuckle and joke that he should probably thank her for pointing out the obvious truth. As they clean up, she notices the lone remaining piece of kimbap in the container, picking it up with a fork and offering to feed it to him directly. Seung immediately panics like an idiot, waving his hands frantically and insisting that he is perfectly capable of eating on his own. She playfully ignores his protests, leaning in close and urging him to just hurry up and eat the final piece since it is only one bite. Unfortunately, her playful nature backfires when her sandal slips, causing her to lose her footing entirely. Seung gasps in sheer shock, lunging forward desperately to catch her before she hits the hard floor. The two of them crash down in a messy heap, with Seung groaning under her weight as they land heavily on the ground. Catching his breath, the young man feels a brief wave of relief that he managed to prevent a nasty fall. However, this relief immediately morphs into sheer terror when he realizes that his hand has landed directly on her hand. Both of them freeze in stunned silence, with Seung paralyzed by his own hands and his sister-in-law gasping in utter embarrassment. Panicking, Seung scrambles backward as if he has been shocked, desperately explaining that his only intention was to stop her from falling. He drops to his knees to apologize profusely, but his kind sister-in-law gently tells him there is absolutely no need to apologize, expressing her gratitude for his quick reflexes. She glances at the clock on the wall and realizes that it is already getting quite late, announcing that she needs to run some grocery errands for dinner and must head out first. Seung can only offer a sheepish farewell as she picks up her things to leave. Before walking out the door, she turns back with a smile and promises to make whatever he wants for lunch next time if he just lets her know. Left alone in the empty bookstore, Seung stands behind the counter and laments how disappointing it is to see her leave so soon, as his foolish heart wanted nothing more than to spend a little more time with her. Night eventually falls, and the moon rises high over the quiet neighborhood. Seung lies wide awake in his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling and finding it completely impossible to fall asleep. His hyperactive mind keeps replaying the day's events, including his sussy accidental morning intrusion in the bathroom and the highly awkward bookstore fall. Sighing deeply as his cheeks turn bright red, he reflects on how many chaotic things happened in a single day and how remarkably beautiful his sister-in-law looked. He clenches his fist in frustration, scolding himself that he has no business concerning himself with a married woman, yet he still cannot help but wish he could train her fat-burning cardio. Just as his thoughts start to wander a bit too far, a sudden mental image of his older brother, Sejun, asking him warmly how work is going pops into his head. Horrified by his own guilt, Seung forcefully slaps both sides of his face to wake himself up, loudly scolding himself for letting his mind drift into such foolish territory. He firmly concludes that no matter how perfectly she fits his ideal type, she remains his brother's devoted wife who genuinely cares for him as family, and he needs to start acting like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey. Realizing that his mind is spiraling completely out of control, Seung decides he desperately needs a cup of cold water to cool himself down before he loses his sanity like a total idiot. He quietly slips out of bed and heads down to the kitchen, pouring himself a refreshing drink in hopes of washing away his sussy thoughts. However, just as he gulps down the cold water, his ears catch a faint, rhythmic sigh echoing through the quiet house. He pauses in confusion, trying to identify the source of the strange proper noise, while remembering that his older brother is currently away on a business trip. Curiosity getting the better of this clueless dummy, Seong silently sneaks down the hallway toward the room where a warm glow of light leaks through a slightly open door. He gently nudges the door further open to peek inside, only for his eyes to widen in absolute shock at the scene unfolding before him. Through the narrow crack, he witnesses his sister-in-law on the bed, strengthening her hand grip to ease her deep tension and loneliness. The young man stands completely frozen, utterly transfixed by the sight as she continues her breathless self-strengthening, completely oblivious to her brother-in-law standing right outside her bedroom door. Standing by the cracked door, Seong is completely overwhelmed by the scene, feeling all the guilt that was haunting him just moments ago completely melt away as he continues to peek at his sister-in-law. This hopeless dummy gets so caught up in the moment that he desires to see even more exercise, his reaction making his internal conflict worse by the second. However, his reckless behavior catches up to him when he accidentally bumps his foot against the door, causing a sharp creaking sound to echo through the hallway. Seong freezes in absolute panic, realizing he has made a massive blunder. Inside the room, his sister-in-law immediately halts her hand grip strengthening, gasping in surprise and turning her head toward the door to see if someone is there. She quickly covers herself and pulls the door open to investigate the silent hallway. Fortunately for our idiot, he manages to scramble around the corner just in time, pressing himself against the wall while sweating profusely and realizing how incredibly close he came to getting into deep trouble. His sister-in-law peers into the dark, empty corridor, ultimately assuming she must have simply heard something wrong before heading back inside. Back in his own bed, the idiot lets out a frustrated sigh, thoroughly annoyed with himself as he wonders why on earth he keeps having these highly sussy thoughts about his brother's wife. Just as he tries to settle down, a sudden knock on his door startles him, and he sits straight up as he hears his sister-in-law calling out to him from the hallway. His overactive imagination immediately plays a wild, proper daydream of her walking in completely improper clothes and begging him for an endurance training, prompting him to shake his head frantically to clear the illusion. He clears his throat and tells her that he is indeed still awake, inviting her to come in. She slowly steps into the room, and Seong gathers his composure to ask what could possibly bring her to his bedroom at such a late hour. Looking at her face, his heart starts pounding as he wonders if his wild daydream is actually about to come true. However, she quickly dispels his silly hopes, explaining that she came to ask if he had happened to walk past her room earlier. She sheepishly admits that she had been tossing and turning in bed, and she was terribly worried that he might have witnessed her hand grip strengthening session. Realizing she is trying to verify if he caught her, our idiot quickly plays it cool, scratching his head and lying smoothly that he did not go downstairs at all today. She lets out a massive sigh of relief, thanking goodness before bidding him good night and preparing to leave. Seong watches her go, feeling a bit of a disappointment and wondering if she really came all this way just to ask that. But before closing the door, she turns back and asks if he has some free time tomorrow to accompany her to a yoga center inside the department store. Seong is a bit confused, but when she mentions she has a lecture to attend there anyway and suggests they go together, he readily agrees. She beams with joy, telling him she is looking forward to their drive tomorrow and playfully instructing him to wear nice clothes. After she leaves, Seong is left sitting on his bed with a racing heart, completely baffled by what she could possibly mean by wanting him to dress nicely. The following afternoon finds Seong back at his bookstore, anxiously checking his phone only to see that it is already past 3 o'clock. He notes that Yunhee is quite late, realizing he really should have picked up his sister-in-law by now. Knowing how exceptionally punctual she always is, he begins to worry, wondering if she might have gotten into some sort of accident on her way. As he paces around the store, desperately hoping nothing bad has happened, a bright voice suddenly calls out behind him, welcoming him as the president. Seong is so startled by the sudden greeting that he bumps right into the speaker, letting out a pained grunt as he collides with a blonde woman. She looks at him in complete surprise, asking why on earth he was just standing right there in the way. Seong holds his head in pain, groaning from the sudden collision with his blonde employee, Young-hee. He rubs his bruised forehead and complains about her being late, only for a completely baffled Young-hee to state that she is not late at all. Suddenly she gasps as she realizes she completely forgot to read his message from earlier that morning. Bowing down in a frantic apology, she wishes him good luck and quickly makes her escape, leaving the poor guy to deal with the painful bump on his head all by himself. Shortly after, Seong and his sister-in-law arrive at the department store, parking their car in the underground lot. She beams and thanks him sweetly for driving her, but her smile quickly fades into concern as she notices the prominent lump on his forehead and asks if he is all right. Seung can only offer an awkward, embarrassed laugh as he tries to downplay the injury. Determined to inspect the damage, his sister-in-law leans, insisting on taking a look to make sure it is nothing serious. This close proximity completely breaks Seung's focus, and he helplessly finds his eyes wandering to her hands, silently admiring how pretty she looks up close. Before he can compose himself, she gasps and abruptly pulls back, blushing deeply as she apologizes for touching him without his permission. The idiot scratches his head in embarrassment, assuring her that it is perfectly fine, but his brain completely short-circuits as he accidentally blurts out aloud that she is incredibly cute. Realizing his monumental blunder, Seung freezes in absolute horror while his sister-in-law stares at him in complete shock, stuttering to clarify what he just said. Desperately backpedaling to save himself, he frantically waves his hands and stammers that he did not mean cute in a sussy way, but rather that she is energetic like a wild animal. Fortunately for this bumbling idiot, she bursts into a fit of giggles, admitting that it has been a very long time since anyone called her cute and that it actually made her feel quite nice, playfully teasing him that he is the one who is actually cuter. Relieved that she took it so well, Seung starts to wonder if he should take a leap of faith and invite her out for a meal afterward. However, she suddenly checks her phone and gasps, warning him that they are going to be late and urging him to hurry as she exits the car, leaving him to follow her with a sigh. The two of them make their way into the bustling department store, riding the escalator up together. Seung notices his sister-in-law scanning the crowd anxiously, wondering exactly who she is searching for so intensely. Her face lights up as she spots a woman in purple workout gear waving at them from a distance. As they approach, his sister-in-law introduces the newcomer as Lena, who warmly introduces herself to Seung as Yurina, the yoga teacher. His sister-in-law happily explains that Yurina had always expressed a strong desire to meet Seung whenever his name came up, which is the sole reason she begged him to come along today. Seung quietly looks at Yurina, realizing that he has actually seen her around once in a while. Before Seung can even process the introduction, his sister-in-law abruptly waves goodbye, cheerfully announcing that she needs to go somewhere else for a little while, and leaving the two of them alone. Standing there in awkward silence, the truth of the situation finally dawns on Seung, as he realizes that, no matter how he tries to sugarcoat it, his sister-in-law brought him here on a blind date to introduce him to the yoga teacher. He stands there in silent disappointment, realizing that she simply wants him to find someone else and become independent soon, before Yurina politely breaks the silence by addressing him. Snapping out of his deep, disappointing thoughts with a sudden start, Seung quickly tries to collect himself and focus on his companion. Leaning in, the yoga teacher peers directly into his eyes, curious about what has been on his mind and wondering why he is suddenly making such a dark, brooding expression. This idiot can only stand there in silence, highly flustered by how closely she is standing in front of him. Yurina smiles sympathetically, concluding that he must be having an incredibly difficult and exhausting time lately. Scratching his head sheepishly, Seung lets out a nervous, self-deprecating laugh, readily admitting that she is absolutely right about his stress. Gazing up at him with a warm and playful expression, the yoga teacher then sweetens her sympathetic attitude by asking if she should use a little comforting exercise to help ease his tension and relieve his exhaustion. Later, as the other students wrap up their session and prepare to head home, Seung arrives at the quiet yoga studio. He slides the wooden door open and politely peeks his head inside, asking if the instructor, Yurina, is currently available. Turning away from her phone with a bright smile, Yurina welcomes him warmly, noting that he has arrived at the absolute perfect time. She instructs Seung to change into his workout gear, which instantly makes this hopeless dummy blush as he gets a close-up look at her tight athletic outfit. As he heads to change, Seung's sweat drops, realizing that his earlier wild daydreams were completely ridiculous and that she was only talking about a standard, hands-on yoga stretch when she offered to touch him. A few minutes later, Seung is lying flat on a blue yoga mat, trembling and groaning in agony as he attempts a deep forward fold. Yurina gently instructs him to slowly exhale, climbing onto his back to press down on his hips and urging him to hold the painful position just a little longer. In this incredibly bent-over position, the physical strain is so intense that Seung's mind goes completely blank, leading him to conclude that yoga is infinitely harder than he originally anticipated, though he admits the deep stretch is highly effective. Sitting up and panting heavily, Seung is caught completely off guard when Yurina stands beside him and suggests that they try big bad yoga next. He looks up in surprise, but she points out that practicing together is far less boring than exercising all by himself. Following her directions, Seung nervously positions himself directly in front of her. Yurina performs a wide leg split on the mat and instructs him to place his hands firmly on her hands while using his knees to press down on her hips to assist her with the deep stretch. He gingerly places his hands on her legs, silently wondering if he is doing this correctly as she praises his positioning. She then instructs him to tilt his upper body forward, put strength into his muscles, and hold the pose. Seyoung is completely flustered by the sudden, intense strains, silently questioning if normal yoga is always this sussy, but he dutifully complies by grasping her thighs and slowly tilting his weight forward as she lies flat on her back. The physical effort is so exhausting that Seyoung's body shakes violently, and he internally complains about how incredibly tiring this exercise is. As he struggles to hold himself up over her, she smiles warmly and lets out a relaxed sigh. Suddenly, Urina wraps her legs tightly around Seyoung's hands, locking her ankles behind his back to pull him down. Seyoung gasps in utter shock, frantically asking what on earth she is doing to him. Urina simply giggles, playfully admitting that she is just teaching him because her hardworking student looks so adorable trying his best. Seyoung continues to tremble under the sudden pressure, panicking that applying weight like this is making it impossible for him to maintain his balance. As Seyoung maintains his precarious balance over Urina, the physical strain of the intense yoga stretch becomes far too tight, and their bodies end up making sweats. Urina gasps in mild surprise at the sudden collision, while Seyoung sweats profusely, completely frozen in utter mortification. This clueless idiot instantly despairs, realizing his reputation is completely ruined and lamenting that he is about to be branded a total disgrace simply because his body had an uncontrollable response to the rigorous exercise. Looking down at her with a red, apologetic face, Seyoung quietly asks why she would choose to play such a sussy and suggestive prank, especially on someone she barely even knows. Urina only smiles warmly, placing her hand gently on his side and revealing that she actually knows him quite well because she often watched him as he walked past her studio. Seyoung has a brief realization, recalling the moments he had looked up from his book at the store and noticed her walking by on the street outside. Urina confesses that she had always felt mysteriously drawn toward him, and by pure coincidence, she discovered his identity while chatting with one of her yoga members, who turned out to be Seyoung's very own sister-in-law. Armed with this knowledge, she had eagerly requested the introduction, leaving Seyoung completely stunned as he finally understood the true story behind their meeting. Back in the present, Urina reaches out to comfort him, gently telling him to put aside his embarrassment and follow his true feelings rather than holding back. Seyoung, highly flustered and struggling to maintain his composure, warns her that she might end up regretting her reckless actions later. Looking up at him with absolute confidence, the yoga teacher asks what on earth she would possibly regret, warmly reassuring him that this calorie-burning session is exactly what she wants. Night has fallen over the two-story brick house, and inside, Sejun lies wide awake in bed with his wife Yeonhee, resting her head against his shoulder. He cannot help but grumble about his younger brother Seyoung, wondering if the idiot is out seeing someone since he is never usually late, yet has still not returned home tonight. Noticing her husband's restlessness, Yeonhee shifts in bed and listens as Sejun asks if she has received any messages from Seyoung. Feeling a bit startled, she quickly denies hearing anything, though her thoughts immediately drift to her brother-in-law. Leaning over Sejun, she gently suggests that Seyoung should really find a partner and get married soon. Sejun lazily looks up, simply muttering a brief inquiry about whether that is truly the case, which Yeonhee softly confirms. Seeing an opportunity with Seyoung away from the house, Yeonhee grows playful and reminds her husband that they are completely alone. Sejun, acting like a bit of a dense dummy, wonders why his brother's absence matters, prompting Yeonhee to blushingly declare that this is their perfect chance to try fat-burning cardio. Sejun remains silent for a moment, looking quite overwhelmed as his wife eagerly waits for his response. With a heavy sigh, Sejun finally sits up and holds her hand, telling her that he agrees and instructing her to wear exercise clothes. However, the poor woman's hopes are immediately shattered when her exhausted husband instantly falls flat on his back, snoring loudly and drifting into a deep sleep before fat-burning cardio can even start. Left completely rejected and frustrated, Yeonhee can only sit in the quiet room with tears welling up in her eyes, utterly disappointed by her husband's complete lack of endurance. Later that night, under the starry sky, footsteps echo outside the gate as Seyoung finally makes his way back to the house. He reflects on how late it has gotten, realizing he lost track of time because he was busy having fun and sharing drinks with the yoga teacher, Urina. Slipping quietly through the front door, our clueless monkey wonders if his older brother is already asleep, only to notice a soft light glowing down the hallway. Realizing someone is still awake despite the late hour, Seyoung cautiously creeps into the dining area to investigate. He freezes in absolute surprise upon stepping into the kitchen, finding his sister-in-law slumped over the table, seemingly passed out after drinking a bottle of soju all by herself. She lets out a heavy sigh as she sleeps, completely unaware of her brother-in-law's presence. Si-young quickly covers his mouth against the strong smell of alcohol, deeply confused as to why his sister-in-law would be drinking so heavily when she normally avoids alcohol entirely, and he wonders if something bad has happened to her. As he looks down at her deep slumber, his inner idiot briefly takes over, and he finds his eyes wandering to her form as he experiences a sudden, highly sussy desire to do endurance training with her. Realizing what a total creep he is, Si-young forcefully shakes his head and berates himself, wondering what on earth he is thinking, and concluding that he must be losing his mind. Deciding to act like a sensible person instead of a lovesick monkey, Si-young gently shakes her shoulder and calls out to her, urging her to wake up before she catches a cold, sleeping in the drafty dining room. Yeon-hee groans softly in response, slowly opening her eyes to look up at him with a flushed, heavily intoxicated expression. In that brief moment, our idiot is completely struck by her beauty, silently realizing that she looks far more attractive than the yoga teacher, Yurina. However, the heavily drunk woman blurs her vision and mistakes him for her husband, softly calling him by his brother's name. Si-young freezes in absolute shock, realizing she must be so drunk that she is mistaking him for Si-jun, and he quickly blushes as he tries to correct her by stating that he is not his older brother. Before he can step away, Yeon-hee suddenly grabs his wrists in a tight grip and pulls him, pleadingly asking if they can continue fat-burning cardio like they were doing before. Si-young's mind completely breaks into confusion as he wonders what on earth she could possibly be talking about, especially when she sleepily mentions that she was not left very satisfied. Realizing just how incredibly drunk his sister-in-law is, Si-young gasps in shock as she suddenly pulls him down into an unexpected, sussy moment. His eyes widen in sheer horror at the sudden scene, and he desperately concludes that they absolutely cannot go any further than this. After she pulls back and sleepily mutters her husband's name once more, Si-young seizes the opportunity to escape. Retreating like a total coward, he flees the kitchen and rushes straight to his room, slamming the door shut to hide in the safety of the darkness. The next morning, bright sunshine pours through the bedroom window, but Si-young lies flat on his back, staring blankly at the ceiling after failing to get a single wink of sleep all night. Sitting up in bed with a heavy sigh, his hyperactive mind keeps replaying the sussy scene from the night before, leaving him holding his head in utter despair as he wonders how he can possibly look his sister-in-law in the face ever again. Hearing soft footsteps on the stairs, his anxiety spikes as he nervously worries about whether she will actually remember the embarrassing events of last night. Gingerly walking down the stairs to face his fate, Si-young is suddenly startled to see his older brother, Si-jun, entering through the front door with his briefcase. Si-young calls out to him, but his guilty conscience immediately makes him panic, wondering if his brother somehow knows about the chaotic scene. However, Si-jun simply lets out a tired sigh and casually mentions that Yeon-hee is currently out cold upstairs, leaving Si-young relieved but still deeply stressed by the dramatic night. Standing in the hallway, Si-young feels a massive wave of relief wash over him as his older brother, Si-jun, mutters that he has absolutely no idea why his wife drank so much last night. Entirely oblivious to the chaotic event that took place, Si-jun casually tells Si-young to make his own breakfast and get ready to head out to the bookstore soon. Si-young quickly bids him a good day, watching his brother leave before reflecting on how deeply asleep Yeon-hee must be after her intense drinking session. Just as he is contemplating last night's events, a faint groan of pain echoes from his sister-in-law's bedroom, immediately catching his attention. Curiosity and concern getting the better of him, Si-young walks over to her door, giving it a polite knock before announcing his entry and stepping inside. He finds Yeon-hee sitting up in bed, weakly holding her head and complaining about a painful headache. Calling out to her gently, Si-young is momentarily paralyzed by her appearance, feeling his heart race all over again. Yeon-hee slowly looks up, surprised to see her brother-in-law standing there. Si-young explains that he heard about her heavy drinking from his brother, prompting her to sheepishly chuckle and admit that she is feeling quite dizzy, though she reassures him that it is merely a minor hangover. As she sweetly thanks him for worrying about her, Si-young has a sudden realization when he notices her completely calm demeanor. He deduces that she has absolutely no memory of their sussy scene from the night before, and a light bulb practically goes off in his head. Relieved by this lucky turn of events, Si-young tells her to wait a moment and runs off, returning shortly after to present her with a warm mug. Yeon-hee curiously asks if the drink is honey water, to which Si-young explains that he drinks it every time he consumes alcohol because it is incredibly effective for curing hangovers. Smiling warmly, he bids her goodbye and announces that he is finally heading off to work. Left alone in her bed, Yeon-hee takes a gentle sip of the warm drink, quietly noting how incredibly sweet it tastes. Later that day at the bookstore, Si-young's clumsy employee, Yeon-hee, is standing precariously on a step stool, her legs trembling violently as she struggles to reach the top shelf. Si-young sits nearby, completely ignoring her struggles as his mind remains hopelessly occupied with thoughts of last night's scene, tormenting himself over the fact that Young-hee is, after all, his brother's wife. Distracted by Young-hee's loud, repeated grunts of frustration, Si-young snaps out of his deep thoughts and sharply orders her to be quiet while she is working. Startled by his sudden outburst, the blonde turns around to complain, asking why her tall boss cannot just lend a hand to make the job easier. Si-young only responds with a smug grin, pointing out that he is the boss while she is merely the part-timer, leaving her to huff in annoyance. Finding her angry reaction rather cute, Si-young watches as she turns back to her task, only for her foot to suddenly slip on the wobbly steps. Losing her balance completely, the poor girl drops her book and crashes heavily to the floor, groaning in pain as Si-young looks on in surprise. As she falls off the step stool, Young-hee lands directly on top of Si-young, pinning him to the floor in an incredibly sussy position. Our absolute idiot of a boss groans in agony under her weight, his face turning bright red as he struggles to endure the sudden impact. Flushed with embarrassment, the clumsy part-timer lets out a soft sound of pain and confusion, completely paralyzed by how sussily they have collided. Still on the floor, a panicked Young-hee quickly apologizes, desperately stammering that she will get off him right away. However, as she shifts around on his lap, Si-young is left sweating profusely, silently questioning if she just let out a soft groan under the awkward contact. To make matters worse, the clumsy employee blushes deeply and pants, explaining that her legs have suddenly lost all their strength, leaving her completely stuck on his lap. As she frantically wonders how she is supposed to stand up, Si-young's sussy mind keeps drifting back to his sister-in-law, Yun-hee. He nervously warns her that she needs to stop moving around like that, prompting a highly confused Young-hee to look back and ask what exactly she has done. Before Si-young can explain, Young-hee notices a very prominent workout gear pressed against her. Blushing furiously, she innocently wonders what on earth is near her, reaching her hand to investigate. She gingerly touches the machine, innocently concluding that it feels incredibly new and good, and she wonders aloud if it is simply his mobile phone. Si-young's eyes nearly pop out of his head in sheer horror as he panics over why she is touching the workout tool and what will happen if she continues. A second later, the horrifying truth finally dawns on the poor blonde, and her face turns completely pale with shock. Screaming at the top of her lungs, her loud shriek echoes all the way outside the bookstore. After the chaotic scene finally calms down, Young-hee sits in an office chair, blushing and panting heavily as she sheepishly apologizes for the incredibly awkward misunderstanding. Si-young, sitting behind her and staring blankly at the ceiling in mortification, tries to reassure her that it is perfectly fine, since she did not do it on purpose, though he internally laments how unbelievably embarrassing the whole situation is. Trying to make amends, Young-hee turns around and makes a highly bizarre proposal, suggesting that while it might sound weird, she is willing to let him do fat-burning cardio to make things even. Si-young's brain completely short-circuits in utter disbelief, silently screaming in panic as he questions what on earth she is saying and why she would make such an unfair, ridiculous offer. Looking at her, our hopeless dummy's hyperactive imagination suddenly takes over, plunging him into a wild and highly sussy daydream where he actually takes her up on the suggestive offer, completely losing his sanity as his thoughts once again get confused with his sister-in-law, Yun-hee. Realizing his mind is spiraling into dangerously crazy territory, Si-young forcefully closes his eyes and scolds himself for having such ridiculous thoughts. To break the awkward tension and snap himself back to reality, he reaches out and delivers a sharp, playful flick directly to Young-hee's forehead, leaving his complaining employee rubbing her bruised head in pain. Nursing her freshly flicked forehead, Young-hee rubs her head in pain, while Si-young sternly lectures her, telling her that she absolutely should not say such highly sussy things to people. Si-young tries to soothe the situation by telling her not to worry about it, prompting a pouting Young-hee to weakly claim she is fine. Still, she huffs in disappointment, muttering that she was actually going to let him train a cute university student. Si-young, acting like a protective older brother, scolds her again, telling her she definitely shouldn't make such offers to just anyone. Highly offended by his phrasing, Young-hee stands up and blushes furiously, yelling that she doesn't just say these things to anyone, and that she only offered because he is her boss. However, before she can finish her explanation, Si-young's phone vibrates, and he happily notes that the yoga teacher, Yurina, is messaging him, leaving his poor employee pouting in frustration. Later that evening, Si-young arrives at the bustling department store, anxiously pacing around and checking his phone as he realizes Yurina is running quite late. Wondering if she is simply too busy, his thoughts are interrupted by the rhythmic clicking of high heels approaching from behind. Turning around, Si-young is pleased to see Yurina arriving, but his smile quickly fades into absolute confusion when he notices his sister-in-law walking right beside her. Yurina apologizes sweetly for keeping him waiting, but Seung can only focus on his sister-in-law, silently wondering why she is here. Yurina quickly explains that they were together because his sister-in-law had kindly helped her tidy up the studio after her class finished. Seung awkwardly nods in understanding, internally reflecting that he really did not want his sister-in-law to see him out on a date. Things quickly get even more awkward when Yurina suddenly grabs Seung's arm. Seung flinches in surprise, but Yurina playfully asks what is wrong, wondering if they weren't already progressing in their partnership. Desperately sweating, Seung whispers that it is highly embarrassing to behave like this with his sister-in-law watching. But Yurina simply dismisses his worries. Watching them with a warm chuckle, his sister-in-law remarks that seeing how close they are makes her feel like she made the absolute right choice in introducing them. She then teasingly tells Seung that she is leaving her yoga teacher in his capable hands before bidding them a pleasant good night and walking away. Seung can only watch her go, his heart sinking with a strange twinge of guilt. Yurina beams, calling his sister-in-law exceptionally witty, but Seung remains distracted by his thoughts. When Yurina playfully calls him her brother-in-law and urges him to hurry up, Seung quickly and firmly corrects her, stating that he is definitely not her brother-in-law. Under the dark night sky, Yurina leads Seung directly to the entrance of a towering luxury building, leaving the young man completely stunned when he realizes they have arrived at a hotel. Walking into the lobby of the class gym, Seung nervously points out that she spoke as if they were merely going on a standard outing, yet they have bypassed all of that and headed straight to a gym. Yurina only delivers a sussy grin, declaring that she simply wants to take proper revenge for their intense encounter the day before. Swiping her card to open the door, Yurina welcomes him into a stunningly beautiful suite. Seung looks around in awe, admitting that it is an incredibly nice gym, which Yurina proudly confirms, noting she booked such a high-end room on purpose. Suddenly, her playful smile shifts to a much more serious expression as she steps in, leaving our flustered dummy to nervously ask what is going on. Standing inside the gym, Yurina looks at Seung with a sly smile, claiming that she has been burning with passion ever since their encounter yesterday, and asking if he is going to take full responsibility. Seung is momentarily taken aback by her sussy words, but before our hopeless dummy can even reply, Yurina walks and begins to make him comfortable. Determined not to let her have the upper hand, Seung decides there is absolutely no chance he is letting her dictate the pace today. He suddenly grabs her by the hand, completely turning the tables by pushing her flat onto the gym floor. As he stands over her and begins to tighten his hands, he confidently declares that unlike yesterday, he is the one who is going to train and discipline her. Yurina lies on her back with her heart pounding in nervous excitement, watching as Seung prepares to join her. He locks his gaze onto her, firmly warning her not to even think about losing her mind as he prepares for a full-body training session. Bright morning light floods the city streets as Seung drives back to his bookstore, feeling completely exhausted after waking up and sharing another full-body training session with Yurina. He notes that because of their late night and early morning activities, he ended up leaving way past the bookstore's usual opening time. Sighing deeply as he grips the steering wheel, he reflects that while he certainly felt good, his energy has been entirely drained, leaving him doubting whether he can even work properly today. Rubbing his head lazily, he concludes that he will just have to open the store a little late, reassuring himself that there are usually very few morning customers anyway. However, as he pulls up to the shop, his eyes widen in surprise as he spots a familiar silhouette waiting right outside the entrance. Recognizing his sister-in-law, Yeonhee, pouting and checking her watch, he parks the car and quickly walks up to greet her. Deeply confused by her presence so early in the morning, Seung asks what she is doing here. Yeonhee turns to him with a deeply annoyed expression, prompting our clueless monkey to nervously wonder why she is making such a cross face. Before he can ask any further, she sharply asks if he even knows what time it is. Seung sheepishly guesses that it is around 10 o'clock, which Yeonhee sternly confirms, pointing out that the bookstore was supposed to open at 9. She explains that since he never came home last night and the store remained closed this morning, she had been incredibly worried about him. Seung's heart begins to thump in his chest as the realization dawns on him, feeling a sudden, foolish wave of happiness at the fact that she was actually worried. Apologizing sheepishly, Seung scratches his head and asks why she didn't just call him, to which she explains that his phone was completely switched off. Seung quickly checks his phone, realizing he forgot to charge it in his rush to leave Yurina's room. Leaning in close with a playful pout, Yeonhee teases him, suggesting that her worries were entirely meaningless, since he was obviously busy spending the night with the yoga instructor. Feeling a bit guilty, Seung admits that while he didn't want her to find out, he confirms her suspicion, noting that she was the one who wanted him to get along well with Yurina in the first place. Yeon-hee holds her lunchbox tightly and quietly agrees, muttering that Yurina is indeed a very good person. Grateful for her matchmaking efforts, Seyoung offers a sheepish laugh and thanks her before pulling out his keys to unlock the bookstore door. He warmly invites her inside, suggesting she rest from waiting and let him get her a cold drink. However, Yeon-hee politely declines, explaining that she only came by to deliver a tiered lunchbox so he wouldn't skip breakfast. Handing over the food, she tells him to eat well and do his best today. Seyoung takes the container, feeling a bit disappointed as he tries to convince her to stay, but she insists that she must rush back home to finish her housework. Just as Seyoung is lamenting her early departure, the loud ringing of the bookstore landline phone suddenly echoes through the shop. Yeon-hee urges him to hurry up and answer it, wondering who could possibly be calling so early. Seyoung picks up the red receiver, only for his clumsy blonde employee Young-hee to loudly scream through the line, angrily demanding to know why on earth his mobile phone has been switched off all morning. On the other end of the line, his employee Young-hee lets out a tired sigh and explains that she won't be able to come to work this afternoon, prompting Seyoung to ask why she cannot make it. Seyoung watches his sister-in-law, Yeon-hee, walk toward the door while Young-hee continues to explain that today is her final assignment deadline and her professor will fail her with an F if she doesn't submit it today. Seyoung silently notes that his stubborn part-timer has obviously been slacking off again, but he tries to remain understanding, telling her that he gets it but she must make sure to come to work tomorrow. After hearing a whiny apology from the girl, Seyoung lets out a heavy sigh and hangs up the red receiver. He feels completely stuck, wondering what he is supposed to do since he has a lot of work to finish this afternoon. Hearing his sigh, Yeon-hee stops her departure and walks back to the counter, calling out to her brother-in-law and asking if the part-timer just called to say she won't be coming in. Seyoung scratches his head with an awkward, nervous laugh, admitting that is pretty much the case. He reflects on how exceptionally busy he is today, silently grumbling that he definitely needs to scold his lazy brat of an employee the next time he sees her. Before he can stress any further, Yeon-hee looks at him with a racing heart and softly proposes helping him out at the store today. Seyoung blinks in surprise, asking her to repeat what she just said in absolute disbelief. Placing a hand over her chest with a confident smile, Yeon-hee proudly declares that she is actually an unexpectedly useful woman. It is a bright, sunny day at Seyoung's bookstore, where stacks of heavy books are piled high all over the floor. Having stepped up to help her brother-in-law, Yeon-hee finds herself doing some serious heavy lifting, struggling under the weight of the massive volumes and letting out a soft grunt as she carefully bends over to set them down. Wiping the sweat from her brow with a tired sigh, she finally declares that they are finished with the hard work, prompting Seyoung to look up in quiet admiration. He turns to her with genuine gratitude, thanking his sister-in-law for her invaluable help, which she warmly dismisses, expressing her relief that she was able to be of assistance. Seeing how exhausted she is, Seyoung suggests she take a quick rest while he wraps up the remaining work, proposing to treat her to some tea to show his appreciation. However, his sister-in-law looks at him with sudden disappointment, realizing he is planning to send her home. When Seyoung innocently points out that she had mentioned being busy with housework, she can only look away in quiet frustration. Clueless as ever, Seyoung wonders why on earth she seems so down, completely missing the shift in her mood, until she suddenly clutches her shoulder with soft groans of pain. He anxiously asks what is wrong, and she explains that lifting all those heavy books has left her shoulders incredibly sore, leaving her wondering how she is supposed to go home and get any chores done at this rate. Realizing he pushed his sister-in-law a bit too hard, Seyoung feels a deep wave of guilt, especially when she pointedly remarks that a massage is the absolute best remedy for a sore shoulder, and wonders aloud if there is anyone around who could help her out. Believing the situation is entirely his fault, our hesitant bookstore manager steps forward and nervously asks if he can be the one to give her a massage to ease the tension. Yeon-hee's eyes light up with subtle satisfaction as she happily accepts his offer, telling him she will be waiting patiently while he finishes up. As Seyoung watches her walk over to the counter, his heart begins to beat rapidly in his chest, and this hopeless dummy cannot help but think that his usually mature sister-in-law seems to have become incredibly cute today. Seyoung soon joins her behind the counter, swallowing hard as the sheer nervousness of the situation begins to set in. He stands behind her, his hands trembling and his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes that actually going through with the massage is infinitely more stressful than simply offering it. However, before they can even get started, the bookstore's entrance bell chimes and a male customer walks through the door, calling out a casual greeting. Hearing no response, the customer wanders further into the shop to see if anyone is around, only to peer over the counter and freeze in absolute shock. Right there behind the desk, Seyoung is caught in an incredibly cardiovascular training session with his sister-in-law. leaving the two of them paralyzed in sheer mortification as their hearts pound wildly in the awkward silence. Se-young and his sister-in-law freeze in absolute horror, staring wide-eyed at each other as the sudden intrusion catches them completely off guard. Just on the other side of the high counter, the confused customer looks around the seemingly empty reception area, wondering if anyone is actually working today. Hearing nothing but silence, the man begins to suspect that the manager might be up on the second floor, slowly making his way toward the staircase. Down on the floor, Se-young and Yun-hee huddled together in a desperate attempt to stay out of sight, with Yun-hee pressing herself tightly against the floor to avoid detection. Our idiot can only hold his breath and pray they won't be discovered, his heart hammering wildly against his ribs as the customer's heavy footsteps echo from the staircase. Just when it seems like their luck might run out, the shop's entrance bell chimes loudly as a young woman calls out from the doorway, impatiently complaining to her boyfriend that they are going to miss their movie if he doesn't hurry up. Realizing how late it is, the customer quickly calls back that he is on his way, hurrying down the stairs and apologizing to his annoyed partner as they finally make their exit together. As the front door swings shut and a peaceful silence returns to the bookstore, Se-young lets out a massive, trembling sigh of relief. Slowly pulling himself up from the cramped floor, Se-young silently thanks his lucky stars that they weren't caught red-handed in such an incredibly sussy position. However, the tension in the room only thickens when Yun-hee, still sitting on the floor with highly flushed cheeks, softly calls out his name. She looks down in hesitation, her heart beating rapidly as she quietly confesses that even though she is married to his older brother, Se-jun, she finds herself feeling incredibly confused and uncertain lately. Se-young stands over her in stunned silence, deeply affected by her words as she struggles to articulate her thoughts. Sensing the heavy weight of her confession, our bumbling manager decides to gently ease the mood, softly reminding her that their unfinished cardiovascular training isn't quite over yet. Caught completely off guard by his gentle intervention, Yun-hee blinks in surprise before looking down with a warm, shy blush, quietly agreeing that they still have some tension to work out. Later, back at the bookstore, Se-young slowly wears up his crisp white shirt while his sister-in-law, Yun-hee, carefully adjusts her jacket behind him. Glancing back at her, this hopeless dummy is completely transfixed by her elegance, silently reflecting on how incredibly beautiful she is. Suddenly, Yun-hee gasps in surprise as she spots the clock on the wall, realizing it is already late in the afternoon and she still needs to buy groceries for dinner. Seeing her panic, Se-young kindly offers to drive her to the store, leaving his sister-in-law staring at him in stunned surprise before she happily accepts the gesture. Shortly after, the two arrive at a massive warehouse-style supermarket. As Se-young pushes their metal cart through the aisles, Yun-hee voices her concern, asking if it is really alright for him to close down the bookstore early. Our reassuring manager quickly tells her not to worry, explaining that since it is Wednesday, business is usually slow anyway, and he has a few things of his own to buy. Her worries immediately melt away when she spots a massive sign advertising a special discount on fruit. Excitedly running over to the display, she happily grabs a ripe mango, cheerfully noting that they are only on sale today. She eagerly explains that while she absolutely loves mangoes, they are usually far too expensive for her to buy, teasingly suggesting that they must have gotten lucky simply because they came shopping together. Chuckling at her enthusiastic reaction, Se-young playfully thinks to himself that she looks like she belongs in a professional commercial. As he watches her smile, his mind drifts back to the incredible cardiovascular training moments they had shared just a short while ago back at the bookstore, leaving him completely baffled by his own luck and unable to believe how quickly things have shifted between them. Their pleasant afternoon is suddenly interrupted by a friendly lady working at a nearby food tasting stand, who cheerfully greets Yun-hee as a newlywed and expresses surprise at seeing her with her husband today. Flustered by the sudden misunderstanding, Yun-hee nervously greets her back, but the talkative employee immediately turns her attention to Se-young, playfully lecturing him for letting his beautiful partner shop all by herself and urging him to help carry the heavy bags. Se-young silently realizes that his older brother has apparently never accompanied Yun-hee to the grocery store, leaving her to handle the chores alone. As Se-young tries to clear up the confusion, he hesitates for a brief moment before deciding to playfully go along with the lady's advice. With a warm smile, he politely promises the clerk that he will make sure his beautiful partner never has a hard time again, leaving his poor sister-in-law standing there in absolute shock as her heart begins to pound wildly against her chest. As the warm glow of the sunset paints the sky, Se-young and his sister-in-law, Yun-hee, walk home together from the supermarket. Carrying the heavy grocery bags, Se-young listens as Yun-hee nervously questions whether he really had to make such a sussy claim to the clerk back at the store. Our daring manager casually shrugs it off, suggesting she should probably get used to hearing those kinds of things, since he sincerely loves her and meant every word he said. Yunhee's heart flutters, but she quickly tries to restore boundaries, softly reminding him that he shouldn't harbor such feelings for her, because she is, after all, his older brother's partner. She quietly points out that continuing down this path is far too dangerous for both of them, and carrying on like this will only lead to trouble. Walking in silence under the twilight, Seyoung silently admits to himself that his sister-in-law is completely right. Yet, despite knowing the risks, this lovesick manager cannot help but realize that living so close to her has completely wavered his heart, making it impossible to ignore his growing feelings. Night eventually falls over the brick house, and inside the quiet kitchen, Yunhee stands by the counter slicing carrots. Her mind is in complete turmoil as she repeatedly tells herself that their recent encounter at the bookstore was a massive mistake that must never happen again. She knows she must maintain proper boundaries, but as she touches her racing chest, she is forced to admit to herself that she has never experienced such sussy, uncontrollable feelings before, making her wonder how long she can actually hold back. Breaking her deep thoughts, Seyoung lazily wanders downstairs barefoot, rubbing his neck and reflecting on how exhausted he feels. Spotting his sister-in-law at the counter, he politely asks if she needs any help preparing dinner. Startled out of her senses, a flushing Yunhee quickly declines, reminding herself that she must not harbor sussy feelings for her brother-in-law. She assures him that dinner is already prepared and mentions that they can eat as soon as his older brother, Sejun, returns home. Complaining of a sore throat from sleeping too long, Seyoung heads over to the refrigerator to grab a cold bottle of water. As he quietly gulps down the refreshing drink, Yunhee watches him with a pounding heart, realizing that she needs to steel her resolve and address the elephant in the room right now. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, she slowly turns to him, preparing to tell him clearly that what they are doing is completely wrong. However, before she can even finish bringing up what happened earlier, Seyoung catches her completely off guard. He suddenly steps up close behind her and starts to help her slice onions. Letting out a startled gasp, a flustered Yunhee frantically protests the sudden move, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. But Seyoung simply dismisses her worries, whispering that it is perfectly fine since they are completely alone in the house, leaving his sister-in-law trembling in confusion over his sussy words as she struggles to keep her composure. Back in the kitchen, Yunhee tries to push Seyoung away, warning him to stop slicing the onions immediately because her husband, Sejun, will be home at any moment. She insists that their morning exercise was nothing more than a simple mistake, but her words only cause Seyoung to pause. Looking down at her, he asks if she truly believes their cardiovascular training was just a mistake, leaving his flustered sister-in-law completely speechless as his hand remains firmly resting on the knife. Before they can argue any further, the sharp ring of the door chime echoes through the house, sending both of them into a sudden panic. Sejun cheerfully calls out that he is home, pausing at the entryway to note his brother's shoes on the floor and realizing Seyoung must have finished work early today. Walking further into the house, he warmly calls out to Seyoung to let him know he has returned, prompting Seyoung to quickly reply from the kitchen counter. Sejun walks into the kitchen and is pleasantly surprised to find Seyoung helping Yunhee with the food, playfully asking what the special occasion is. Seyoung casually answers that he merely wanted to help his sister-in-law out for once, leaving a silent, blushing Yunhee to stand beside them in utter embarrassment. Entirely oblivious to the tension, Sejun smiles warmly and remarks on how nice it is to see the two of them getting along so well, announcing that he will wash up quickly before they all sit down for dinner. Seyoung politely bids him go ahead, and the moment his brother leaves the room, a heavy, silent sigh of relief escapes from Yunhee's lips. Once they are alone again, Seyoung turns to her and asks her to continue what she was trying to say earlier. Before she can gather her thoughts, this incredibly sussy idiot leans in and directly asks if she will come to his room later tonight. Stunned by his forwardness, Yunhee silently wonders if he has always been this stupid. However, she quickly realizes that this might actually be the perfect opportunity to set things straight. Smiling subtly to herself, she agrees to meet him in his room tonight, firmly resolving that she will use the opportunity to tell him fair and square that they can have a calorie-burning session again. As the moon rises high over the neighborhood, Yunhee heads outside to complete her usual late-night jump rope routine, pushing through the exhausting cardio and sweating heavily in the cool night air. Afterward, she steps into the warm shower, letting the water wash away her fatigue while she mentally steels her resolve. She reminds herself that Seyoung is simply confused and that she was equally mistaken, concluding that she must firmly set her boundaries tonight, once and for all. Wrapping herself in a clean white towel, she quietly slips back into her bedroom, only to find Sejun already fast asleep and snoring softly on the bed. Seizing the quiet moment, she changes into a delicate jacket, and steps out into the dimly lit hallway. Standing right outside Si-young's bedroom door, our usually composed sister-in-law feels her heart hammer violently against her chest, leaving her to wonder why on earth she is so incredibly tensed up when her only goal is to tell him to stop. Standing outside Si-young's bedroom, Yun-hee raises her hand and gives the wooden door a polite knock, softly announcing her arrival before our waiting manager warmly invites her inside. She gingerly steps into the dimly lit room, her bare feet pressing against the floor as she sheepishly apologizes for keeping him waiting. Si-young quickly reassures her that it is perfectly fine, gesturing to the empty spot on the mattress beside him and gently encouraging her to sit down so her legs won't get tired from standing. Accepting his invitation, Yun-hee sits on the edge of the bed, with her heart pounding wildly in her chest, firmly reminding herself that she needs to speak with absolute clarity so this stubborn idiot doesn't misinterpret her intentions. Looking him directly in the eyes, she quietly explains that the cardiovascular training that happened between them earlier was a major mistake, admitting that she simply got swept away by the chaos of the moment before she could think straight. She goes on to declare her devotion to his older brother, Si-jun, gently suggesting that Si-young's young heart must have momentarily led him astray, causing him to make a careless mistake without fully realizing the consequences. Listening to her speech in silence, Si-young lets out a soft, defeated sigh before quietly nodding in agreement, admitting that he understands her position if she feels that strongly about it. However, his surprisingly easy acceptance leaves Yun-hee feeling a sudden, unexpected wave of guilt as she looks down at her hands, wondering why she feels so bad when she is technically the one trying to do the right thing. She quickly shakes the silly thought from her head, firmly telling herself that she has absolutely nothing to feel guilty about since she is the real victim trying to establish boundaries. But just as she thinks the matter is completely settled, Si-young suddenly turns the tables on his sister-in-law once again. Reaching out with a steady hand, he firmly grasps her hand, locking his eyes onto hers as their hearts beat rapidly in the quiet room. Looking at her with absolute intensity, this relentless idiot boldly proposes that if they are truly going to end things here, they should share one final, fat-burning cardio session together before parting ways forever. Staring at him with wide, shocked eyes, Yun-hee stands completely frozen, utterly bewildered by his sudden proposal. She nervously asks if he somehow completely misunderstood her entire explanation, firmly reiterating that she has no intention of continuing their cardio partnership any longer. However, Si-young remains completely unfazed, leaning in slightly as he calmly proposes a compromise. He softly requests that they share just one final fat-burning cardio together, promising that he will never touch her again if she agrees to this one last request. Looking at her face, this stubborn idiot swallows hard, silently waiting to see if his words have reached her. With her heart pounding furiously against her chest, Yun-hee gazes back at him, completely baffled as to why he is being so incredibly stubborn about the matter. She cannot help but wonder if his feelings for her are truly that deep, silently questioning whether he really desires to be sussy to her so badly that he is willing to beg for one last chance. Overwhelmed by his persistence, our usually composed sister-in-law finally lets out a soft sigh and reluctantly agrees to his proposal. She turns to him with a flushed face and firmly warns him that this must absolutely be the very last time, expressing her sincere hope that he will keep his word and leave her alone afterward. Si-young looks back at her with soft, deeply grateful eyes, quietly promising that he will. Feeling her face turn completely red as her heart hammers in her chest, Yun-hee quietly urges him to hurry up so they can get started and finally put an end to this fat-burning cardio encounter once and for all. Later, Si-young glances at his digital alarm clock, realizing it is already past midnight, and gently suggests that his sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, head back to her room to get some rest. Agreeing with a quiet nod, she prepares to slip away, quietly pointing out how much trouble they would be in if her husband, Si-jun, were to wake up and find her missing. Si-young can only watch in disappointment as she prepares to leave, silently wishing she could stay and do high-intensity cardio sessions with him in his room instead of returning to his brother's room. Just as she is about to walk out, Lee Ryong leans in. She looks at him with a soft, comforting gaze, acknowledging that she knows how difficult it is for him to let her go, but teasingly tells him not to look so downcast because his worried expression is making her anxious. Highly flustered by her proximity, this idiot can only stammer a quiet agreement, watching in silence as she bids him good night and quietly closes the bedroom door behind her. Si-young is left alone in his bed, a soft, content smile spreading across his face as he drifts off. The scene transitions to the bright daytime at Si-young's bookstore, where Si-young smoothly handles a transaction, thanking a customer and handing back his payment card with a warm farewell. As the satisfied customer departs, Si-young turns his attention to his blonde part-timer, Yeon-hee, playfully noting that while she was completely panicked during her first day on the job, she seems to be handling the workload perfectly fine today. The proud employee smugly brushes it off, declaring that her natural skills are simply showing and that part-time work is a total piece of cake for someone as experienced as her. Leaning over the counter, the observant part-timer suddenly notices Si-young's unusual expression and curiously asks if something good has happened, teasingly pointing out that he usually sports a highly sour face. Caught completely off guard, our blushing manager stammers a confused reply, prompting her to giggle and playfully guess that he must have found himself a girlfriend. While she initially mocks the idea by suggesting he is far too pure to do such things, Si-young's sudden, blushing silence makes her eyes widen in realization. Sensing she hit the nail on the head, the excited employee leans in, desperately demanding to know if the girl is pretty and what her character is like, leaving a flustered Si-young trying to deny her suspicions while she remains completely convinced that her boss is hiding a secret connection. Before the interrogation can go any further, the entrance bell chimes, and Si-young's sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, steps through the door carrying a tiered lunchbox. She cheerfully announces that she has brought Si-young some lunch, prompting a pleasantly surprised Si-young to greet her warmly. Bowing politely, the part-timer welcomes her as the boss's sister-in-law, but her sharp mind immediately picks up on their familiar greetings, curiously wondering why the two of them are close enough to casually call each other by their first names. Lee Ryong smiles warmly and notes that it is wonderful to have Yeon-hee working today as well, happily revealing that she prepared plenty of food so they can both enjoy a delicious lunch together, leaving the grateful part-timer thanking her while Si-young smiles in quiet relief. Reaching across the counter, Si-young offers to take the heavy lunchbox from his sister-in-law Lee Ryong. However, as he grabs the handle, his fingers accidentally brush against her hand, sending a sudden jolt through him that makes him gasp in surprise. He quickly pulls the container closer, his cheeks flushing a deep red and his heart pounding rapidly as this flustered manager quietly thanks her for going out of her way to bring them food. Lee Ryong's face also turns a warm shade of pink, her own heart fluttering as she shyly tells him not to mention it and expresses her hope that he enjoys his meal. Standing right next to them, the blonde part-timer watches this entire exchange with wide, disbelieving eyes, utterly baffled by why the two of them are suddenly blushing and acting so flustered around each other. As she looks back and forth between her boss's embarrassed face and his sister-in-law's sheepish smile, a wild and highly scandalous realization finally dawns on her, leaving her silently panicking over the shocking possibility that her boss might actually be doing endurance training with his very own sister-in-law. Go Yeon-hee, the bookstore's blonde employee, slowly slides a book out from the shelf, her mind drifting far away from her actual work duties. Dressed in a form-fitting green dress, she stands by the racks, completely lost in her thoughts as she recalls how her boss Si-young was looking at his sister-in-law earlier in the day. She initially wonders if there is something sussy going on between them, but she quickly dismisses the ridiculous thought with a quiet sigh, realizing there is absolutely no way her boss would be seeing his own brother's wife. Still, this curious employee cannot help but wonder who the mystery woman in Si-young's life actually is, deeply curious about who he could possibly be going out with. Her deep contemplation is suddenly interrupted when Si-young calls out her name to get her attention. Turning around in mild surprise, she looks over at her boss as he explains that, since the back warehouse stock hasn't been sorted through yet, they should head back and clear it out together. She quickly snaps out of her daze and eagerly runs over to assist him, promising she will be right there to help. Stepping into the storage room, Si-young flips on the light switch to reveal massive, towering stacks of books piled high on the concrete floor. Looking at the overwhelming mess, Si-young lets out a sheepish laugh, realizing that this task is going to take them a lot longer than he originally anticipated. Yeon-hee takes a look at the heavy boxes and immediately notes that sorting through just the main piles will take at least 30 minutes, adding that the massive stack in the corner will easily take over 2 hours of backbreaking labor. She playfully pouts and teases Si-young, calling him an absolute devil of an employer for making his worker do such heavy lifting. Feeling a bit guilty, the young idiot scratches his head and suggests that since he can handle the rest on his own, she should just head home and call it a day. However, our clever employee isn't about to let him off that easily, teasingly suggesting that she knows his tricks and that he will only find a way to punish her with more work later if she leaves now. With a bright smile, she offers a compromise, lifting a heavy cardboard box and declaring that she is willing to do all the heavy lifting for him if he agrees to buy her a drink later tonight. Si-young can only look at his brazen employee in mild amusement, quietly reflecting that rather than him being a devil boss, she is definitely the real devil employee of the shop. Though he agrees that buying her a single drink is a small price to pay for getting all this work done. With the deal officially made, Yun-hee happily gets to work as Se-young begins directing her, pointing out that the novels should go on one shelf while the essays are placed in the rack. As she crouches down right in front of him to sort the textbooks onto the lower shelves, our clueless monkey suddenly finds himself in an incredibly awkward situation. Bending over directly in his line of sight, her sussy posture leaves Se-young completely flustered, swallowing hard in sheer embarrassment as he desperately tries to figure out where on earth he should avert his eyes. Thankfully, his torment is cut short when she suddenly gasps in surprise, pulling a specific book from the pile. Looking down at the cover of the novel, titled The Big Bad Book, Se-young asks if she is familiar with the story. She eagerly confirms that she is, noting that it is one of the most popular and highly rated novels on the shelves because of its incredibly detailed and descriptive cardiovascular training education, sending both of their imaginations drifting off to the dramatic and passionate pages of the popular story. Se-young points out that the sussy novel actually doesn't hesitate to include several highly controversial and proper scenes, admitting that it is rather unexpected to see his employee reading these types of books. Standing remarkably close to him, the blonde employee, Go Yun-hee, holds the volume open and explains that her school's theater club is actually preparing to perform this very story for their upcoming play. Se-young takes a glance at the passionate lines printed on the open page while Yun-hee proudly clears her throat, boasting that she was actually selected to play the main lead character. Se-young is taken aback by this revelation, realizing that the main lead of the story is indeed the controversial dummy herself. Standing right beside her boss in the tight space, this silly employee suddenly becomes hyper-aware of their proximity, her heart fluttering as she realizes just how sussily Se-young is standing next to her. Looking down sheepishly, Yun-hee sighs and admits that she has spent a lot of time thinking about the role, but she is seriously considering giving it up altogether. She explains that even though this is the very first lead role she has ever managed to land after working so hard, she keeps getting her mistakes pointed out during rehearsals. Because of this constant criticism, she is feeling deeply discouraged and was thinking about simply handing the coveted role over to one of her theater juniors instead. Se-young looks at her with genuine concern, pointing out that she will surely regret giving up such a major opportunity after working so hard for it. Yun-hee sadly agrees that she definitely would regret it, but she feels she has very little choice in the matter since her acting skills simply aren't up to par yet. Determined to distract herself from her heavy thoughts, she urges him to get this warehouse work finished quickly so they can both head home soon. Lifting a heavy cardboard box with a loud grunt, Yun-hee struggles to carry the load, leaving Se-young to silently reflect on how much she clearly wanted to play that lead role despite her current doubts. As she sighs heavily and carries the box through the cluttered warehouse, her high-heeled sandal catches on a thick red book left carelessly on the floor. Losing her footing entirely, the clumsy girl gasps in sheer shock as she begins to tumble backward, sending the box of books flying through the air to scatter across the floor in a loud, chaotic mess. Fortunately for our accident-prone worker, Se-young reacts with lightning reflexes, lunging forward to catch her before she hits the hard concrete floor. The two of them crash down in a heap, with Yun-hee landing directly on top of her boss and pinning him beneath her. As they lie there among the scattered novels, their hearts begin to pound wildly in the sudden silence. Catching her breath, a flustered Yun-hee mutters about how terrifying that sudden fall was, prompting her exasperated boss to wonder aloud why on earth she has to be so incredibly clumsy all the time. Locking eyes, both of them blush furiously as their hearts hammer loudly against each other. Yun-hee suddenly notices the rapid beating of Se-young's chest, while Se-young tries to ease the intense tension by gently requesting that she please get her long hair out of his face if she is truly sorry about the fall. Apologizing profusely, Yun-hee sheepishly explains that she really didn't intend to be this bothersome or clumsy. Se-young only smiles warmly, reassuring her that it is perfectly fine and playfully addressing her as Miss Dummy. Yun-hee bursts into a bright fit of giggles, finding her boss's humor incredibly funny and asking what is up with the sudden nickname. Se-young playfully retorts that she always seems to sport a bored look on her face, which makes the title fit her perfectly. Suddenly, this dramatic employee has a realization, recognizing that his words are the exact lines spoken by the character James in the novel they were just discussing. Deciding to show off her acting skills right then and there, the dramatic blonde takes a deep breath and fully commits to her character. Sitting proudly on top of the floor, she strikes a passionate pose and dramatically recites the dummy's lines, proclaiming that while she might have been born an orphan and raised by the charity of others, that doesn't mean she is destined to spend her entire life living like a loser. She leans in with absolute confidence, delivering her performance with intense emotion, as she declares that wasting away a pretty face like hers in a life of sheer boredom is practically a sin. Lying flat on the floor, Se-young is completely stunned by her sudden dramatic shift, silently realizing that his clumsy employee is actually an exceptionally talented actress. Yeon-hee delivers the final line of the scene, locking her gaze onto his and calling him by the character's name, James. Seyoung's mind completely short-circuits. As he looks at her face up close, the sudden proximity makes him realize for the first time that his employee is actually incredibly beautiful. Completely captivated by her intense gaze, our blushing manager's heart hammers wildly in his chest as he softly complies with her performance, quietly addressing her back as Miss Dummy. Lying on the floor, Seyoung is completely captivated by how incredibly beautiful Go Yeon-hee looks up close. However, his sussy thoughts are quickly cut short when he suddenly feels her shifting on the floor, going much crazier than a simple dialogue reading would ever require. A soft sound escapes her lips as she moves, leaving our flustered manager to sweat profusely as he wonders why on earth she is suddenly taking the aspect of her performance so far. He silently questions if they weren't supposed to just be reciting the written dialogue, suddenly realizing a major detail about the story they are practicing. In the novel, the character James only appears when he wants to engage in a full-body training session with the dummy girl, meaning that they are actually rehearsing a highly suggestive and sussy scene from the book. Yeon-hee continues her dramatic performance, breathing heavily as she delivers her lines with absolute devotion. She blushes deeply, reciting the dummy girl's internal struggle about whether she should accept the training he offers her, questioning if she should regard this sudden joy as her new faith and live the rest of her life serving it. Our bumbling idiot finds the entire situation incredibly embarrassing, yet he has to admit to himself that his employee is doing an absolutely fantastic job of staying in character. However, as she continues to sway and act out her role directly over the floor, Seyoung realizes that something feels highly unusual. Despite this only being a theatrical rehearsal, he notices that her entire body is shaking and her legs are trembling against the floor. He gulps nervously, wondering why her reaction is so intense and if there is a deeper reason behind her sudden lack of composure. Unable to hold back his curiosity, Seyoung blurts out a highly personal question, directly asking Yeon-hee if she has actually never experienced any fat-burning cardio sessions before. The sudden question catches the naive blonde actress completely off guard, causing her to instantly freeze in absolute shock. Her face turns a deep, fiery shade of red, and she gasps in utter mortification as her eyes widen. She frantically stammers in a panic, demanding to know what on earth he could possibly mean by asking her such an incredibly embarrassing and sudden question. Seyoung quickly tries to ease her panic, sitting up slightly and rubbing his neck as he explains his reasoning. He assures her that while he understands they have only been rehearsing a play, she was acting incredibly awkward and stiff during the sussy portions of the scene. He points out that in order to deliver a truly natural and confident performance, an actor generally needs to have some level of real-world experience in that department. He clarifies that he was merely curious if this was indeed her first time, since a lack of cardiovascular training would make it nearly impossible for her to fully immerse herself in the intense, dramatic emotions of her character. Seyoung quickly tells her not to take his constructive criticism too personally, but Yeon-hee cuts him off mid-sentence, softly asking if they should simply do it then. Seyoung can only blink in utter confusion, completely baffled by her sudden statement. Leaning in with her heart hammering furiously against her ribs, Yeon-hee stares directly into his eyes with a deeply flushed face. Pressing her hands firmly against the concrete floor on either side of his legs, she locks her gaze onto her boss, and boldly proposes that they should go ahead and share a real fat-burning cardio session right then and there to give her the experience she needs. Seyoung can only stare at his employee in utter disbelief, blundering out a quiet exclamation of shock at her incredibly sussy suggestion. Trying to regain his composure as she sits directly on the floor, our flustered manager addresses Go Yeon-hee by her name, requesting that she explain exactly what it is she wants him to teach her. Yeon-hee looks down at him, her face turning bright red, as she realizes the sheer intensity of their proximity. Seyoung swallows hard, sweating profusely as a sudden wave of panic washes over him, leaving him to silently pray that she isn't suggesting what he thinks she is suggesting. Fortunately for our panic-stricken idiot, Yeon-hee suddenly waves her hands frantically in the air, desperately clarifying that she is obviously talking about the acting performance. She explains that she only meant for him to teach her how to act out the emotional nuances of the scene properly. Seyoung lets out a quiet sigh of relief, though he points out that, when it comes to the technicalities of acting, she is already far more knowledgeable than him, since he is just an ordinary outsider who runs a bookstore. Yeon-hee pouts in disappointment, admitting that she had assumed he was theoretically smart and that's why she asked, muttering that his lack of help is quite a bummer. Amused by her dramatic reaction, Seyoung stands up and dusts himself off, warmly reassuring her that her performance was actually excellent, aside from the few minor awkward moments he pointed out earlier. He chuckles, admitting that she almost completely fooled him, and adding that at the rate she was going, he might actually believe she is a professional actress. However, as Seung turns away, his inner thoughts return to reality, and he sadly reflects that there is absolutely no reason why a young, attractive woman like Yun-hee would ever want to share a real fat-burning cardio session with him anyway. Meanwhile, the blonde employee stands nearby, looking down shyly while nervously fidgeting with her fingers. To break the awkward silence, Seung playfully orders her to stop sitting around and hurry up to help him finish, while she quickly reminds him of his promise to buy her a drink once they are done, which he readily agrees to. Night quickly falls over the city, and once Seung's bookstore is finally closed for the evening, the two head out to a bustling local pub named 1991 Soju and Beer. Sitting at a wooden table next to a bottle of Jinsil soju and a basket of fried chicken, Seung watches his companion with a tired, sweat-dropped expression. Yun-hee is already heavily flushed, slurring her words lazily as she tries to speak. Seung dryly notes that she appears to be completely drunk, but the stubborn girl leans her head on her hand and slurs a protest, claiming that she is actually a heavy drinker and isn't intoxicated at all yet. Seung can only stare at her with a deadpan face, silently reflecting that no matter how she boasts, she definitely isn't a heavyweight drinker, especially since she has managed to completely lose her sanity after consuming a mere half bottle of soju. Hoping to avoid any further chaos, Seung tells her that he believes her, but suggests they stop drinking immediately, since it is getting quite late. Yun-hee whines playfully, asking what the big hurry is, before crossing her arms over her chest and loudly demanding to know where on earth he wants to take her. Seung's eyes nearly pop out of his head in sheer horror as the nearby restaurant patrons turn to stare at them in complete shock, leaving him to frantically wave his hands and beg her to stop making such suggestive jokes in public. Giggling sussily at his absolute panic, the tipsy blonde slides her hand down to her lap and whispers to herself that her boss is such a total cutie. Letting out a heavy sigh, Seung tiredly lectures her that she shouldn't make fun of her elders like this. Yun-hee only turns her head with a lazy grin, playfully scoffing at the comment and pointing out that he is only a few years older than her, meaning he has absolutely no right to call himself an elder. Taking a quick shot of soju to calm his nerves, Seung realizes that this drunk troublemaker is completely controlling the pace of the conversation, and he decides he desperately needs to turn the tables on her. Looking at her with a calm expression, he casually asks if there happens to be a guy around that she actually likes, hoping to catch her off guard for once. Under the quiet cover of the night sky, Seung's sister-in-law, Yun-hee, finally returns home to the quiet brick house. Dressed in her sweaty athletic workout clothes after an intense late-night run, she slips off her sneakers at the entryway, silently reflecting that she had only planned to go for a short run, but ended up staying out much longer than she originally expected. Catching her breath, she concludes that from now on, she will definitely have to go a little easier on herself and not push her body to such extreme limits. Stepping further into the dark foyer, she looks around in mild surprise, quickly realizing that the house is unusually dark and quiet because Seung is not back yet. She notes that he would normally be home by this hour, leaving her to wonder what on earth could possibly be keeping him so busy today. Feeling hot and exhausted from her jog, she decides that a warm, soothing shower is exactly what she needs to wash away the sweat and tension. Standing under the steaming spray of the shower, the rushing water cascades over her hair and down her back as she tries to relax. However, instead of calming her down, the quiet shower only leaves her alone with her thoughts, which immediately drift back to her brother-in-law. She keeps wondering what could possibly be keeping him out so late, reflecting on the fact that he has never been this late before. Closing her eyes under the warm stream of water, our lonely sister-in-law is forced to admit to herself that she simply cannot stop thinking about Seung, no matter how hard she tries to distract her mind. Her hyperactive imagination quickly begins replaying their cardiovascular training moments together. She vividly recalls the sheer training previous encounters, silently acknowledging that Seung always trains her with the absolute best passion whenever they are together. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of longing and loneliness in the empty shower, she tentatively decides to build that wrist stamina to ease her growing tension. However, she quickly realizes with a heavy sigh that this self-training is completely unsatisfying, and it doesn't ease her burning needs even in the slightest. She sadly concludes that her own methods cannot possibly compare to Seung's training, whispering his name in her head as her feelings only grow stronger under the running water. As the warm droplets continue to splash onto the shower floor, her heart aches with absolute loneliness, and she can only pray that he will finish up whatever he is doing and come home quickly. Morning light shines brightly over the two-story brick house, where Seung's sister-in-law, Yun-hee, is already hard at work in the kitchen, scrubbing the breakfast dishes while wearing her pink rubber gloves and a form-fitting gray dress. Her husband, Sejun, is adjusting his tie nearby as he prepares for his workday. He casually mentions that he wonders what on earth Seung was up to yesterday, pointing out that not only did his younger brother return home incredibly late, but he is also sleeping far past his usual time today. Sejun reflects that normally Seung would already be preparing to leave for the bookstore by now, finding his unusual behavior rather suspicious. Turning to her husband with a warm, reassuring smile, Yeon-hee gently tells him not to worry about his brother too much, suggesting that Seung must have simply been extremely busy and is now completely exhausted from his work. Sejun adjusts his glasses and picks up his briefcase, still sounding rather concerned as he walks toward the foyer. He mutters that Seung is definitely not the type of person to stay out late, requesting that Yeon-hee make sure to ask his younger brother where he was and what he was up to last night. Before he can step out the door, Sejun's phone suddenly vibrates in his pocket, prompting him to pull it out to investigate. Looking down at the screen, he reads a text message from a contact named Han Seo-ah, asking if he has left the house yet. Sejun stares at the screen with a serious and contemplative expression, silently keeping the message to himself. He quickly announces to his wife that he needs to leave immediately, and when Yeon-hee asks him to wait just a moment so she can take off her dishwashing gloves and see him off properly, he dismisses her offer, stating that there is no need because it will only make him late. Yeon-hee can only watch him go, warmly bidding him to come home safely as the front door clicks shut. Now, alone in the quiet house, Yeon-hee stands in the hallway for a moment before deciding that she should go upstairs to wake Seung up herself. She walks barefoot up the marble stairs, making her way up to the second floor. Reaching his bedroom, she is surprised to find that his door has been left slightly open. She silently worries that he might catch a cold since it gets so chilly during the night, and she gently peeks through the crack to see what her brother-in-law is up to. Seung is fast asleep, shirtless on his bed, and wearing nothing but his dark blue jacket. Looking at him, Yeon-hee notes how incredibly exhausted he looks, but her eyes quickly scan his athletic physique, leaving her to wonder where on earth he could have been until this morning. She initially thinks that he must have been working late at the bookstore, but she quickly experiences a sudden pang of jealousy, wondering if he might have visited the yoga instructor Yurina's place instead. Shaking the uncomfortable thought from her head, she steps into the room and softly calls his name, telling him to wake up. She places her hand gently on his hand and shakes him, but Seung remains locked in an incredibly deep sleep. Leaning in to try again, Yeon-hee suddenly freezes in absolute shock. Her cheeks flush a deep, bright red, and her eyes widen in sheer mortification as her gaze lands on his training tools. Right there before her eyes, she realizes that even though her brother-in-law is completely fast asleep, his electric training tools are displaying fully 100% charge because they were connected to plug all night, leaving our flustered sister-in-law completely paralyzed in embarrassment. Later, Sejun bids his younger brother, Seung, a polite farewell, instructing him to leave for work. Seung agrees and prepares to head out the door, while his sister-in-law, Yeon-hee, stands nearby in the hallway to see him off. Suddenly, Yeon-hee gasps, realizing that she almost forgot something important, which leaves a confused Seung to ask if she forgot to bring something. Before she can even answer, our bold idiot leans in and delivers a training instinct on her. Seung casually explains that he forgot to give her a parting training instinct, leaving his flustered sister-in-law to blush deeply and stammer a protest about his sudden sussiness. Seung only smiles warmly, playfully asking if she truly believes she could stop him from giving her the gesture before confidently announcing his departure. Yeon-hee stands alone in the hallway with her heart hammering furiously against her chest, quietly bidding him to come home safely as a heavy sigh escapes her lips. Sitting down heavily on the living room sofa, she curls her legs up tight and begins to reflect on their partnership, deeply wondering since when this massive, chaotic misunderstanding first started. Looking out the window, she experiences a startling realization, feeling as if Seung is her actual devoted partner instead of Sejun. She hugs her knees tightly, deeply touched by the fact that Seung went out of his way to give her such a sussy parting gesture, whereas her actual husband, Sejun, has never once done anything like that for her in all their years together. Meanwhile, the bright afternoon sun shines over Seung's bookstore, where Seung sits behind the counter, lazily flipping through a book. He silently notes that today must be the day off for his clumsy part-timer, Go Yeon-hee, which actually brings him a massive wave of relief, since he had absolutely no idea how he would face her after their chaotic drinking session the night before. Still, our bumbling manager lets out a heavy sigh, wondering if the silly girl has already forgotten her promise to have drinks with him again, and concluding that he will just have to find some other way to kill time today. Suddenly, the rhythmic chime of the entrance bell echoes through the quiet shop. Seung looks up to deliver his standard welcoming greeting to the customer, only to freeze in absolute surprise upon seeing the gorgeous yoga instructor, Yurina, walking through the door. Dressed in a stylish, off-the-shoulder yellow top and a light blue jacket, Yurina happily explains that she was simply passing by and decided to take a look inside since this is her very first time actually stepping into his bookstore. Seyoung is visibly startled by her sudden appearance, nervously questioning why on earth she came here. Yurina only giggles playfully, asking why he is acting so incredibly startled to see her. Leaning over the counter, she teasingly points out that after everything they shared during their high-intensity cardio session, he never once bothered to call her back, forcing her to come search for him herself. Seyoung can only offer a sheepish, embarrassed laugh, silently realizing that he completely forgot to call her because he got so caught up in his daily bookstore work. Yurina looks around and asks if she can sit on the modern chair near the staircase, and Seyoung quickly nods in agreement. Settling into the seat, the cheeky yoga teacher playfully announces that she is going to wait right here until he is completely finished with his shift to ensure he doesn't try to run away, before casually asking if she can get a cup of cold water. Seyoung immediately delivers a flat, deadpan rejection, claiming that they don't have any water in the store. Internally, our exasperated manager is silently screaming at the sheer audacity of this woman. Yurina only smiles knowingly at his blunt rejection, teasingly replying that of course they don't have water. Seyoung goes back to his duties, scanning a yellow book for a male customer with a quick beep. As he charges 15,000 won, the male customer blushes furiously upon seeing Yurina sitting nearby, and Seyoung politely thanks him and bids him to visit again. As the flustered man quickly scurries out, Yurina observes the shop's sudden activity, noting that there seems to be a sudden and massive increase in male customers. The idiot dryly agrees, reflecting that there wasn't even a single fly in the shop until just a minute ago when she walked in. Yurina's playful expression shifts to a much more serious one as she gazes at Seyoung, pointing out that if he is truly planning to become a literature teacher on top of running this entire bookstore, his life is going to become incredibly difficult and exhausting, asking if he is absolutely certain about his ambitious decision. Seyoung smiles warmly at the yoga teacher, explaining that he pursues his studies and runs the shop simply because he genuinely loves books, meaning that all of this studying and bookstore work doesn't really feel like hard work to him at all. Yurina gazes at him with a soft and intrigued expression, silently reflecting that she had originally assumed this handsome dude was all about his good looks, but realizing that he actually possesses a remarkably charming and sincere personality underneath his handsome exterior. Amused and highly intrigued by his sweet response, the playful yoga instructor smiles subtly to herself, wondering if she should tease her bumbling bookstore manager just a little bit. She slowly slides her hand down to check fully charged training tools. Seyoung's eyes instantly pop open in absolute horror as he feels her hand approaching his bag, his entire mind shivering as his hyperactive mind frantically panics over what on earth this disgusting woman is planning to do. Before this hopeless dummy can even try to pull back, Yurina's hand lands directly and firmly on his training tools. Completely paralyzed in absolute panic, a sweating Seyoung stammers a frantic, hushed protest, desperately demanding to know what on earth she thinks she is doing right in front of all the bookstore customers who are browsing nearby. Rather than backing off, Yurina only places her finger gently over her lips to make a quiet, shushing motion, delivering a sly, teasing smile to silence his protests, while her hand checks if his training tools are fully charged for use in a fat-burning cardio session. The scene opens in the quiet aisles of Seyoung's bookstore, where two male customers are browsing the shelves. One of them curiously asks his friend if he has spotted the new part-timer yet, admitting that he saw her earlier and found her absolutely gorgeous. The other looks up in mild confusion, admitting he has not seen anyone matching that description yet. Eager to catch a glimpse, they both turn their attention toward the front counter, only to find the area seemingly deserted of any beautiful employees. Instead, they only spot our bumbling idiot, Seyoung, sitting behind the desk. One of the men is left scratching his head, completely certain that a highly attractive girl was standing right there just a second ago, leaving them entirely clueless about where she could have vanished to. Little do these oblivious customers know, a highly sussy and private endurance training session is unfolding right under their noses. Crouched entirely out of sight beneath the high counter, the disgusting yoga instructor, Yurina, is busy delivering a breathless, hands-on muscle-toning workout to our helpless manager. Seyoung is left sweating profusely, his heart pounding in sheer terror as he desperately tries to keep his composure, silently realizing that if they get caught in this highly improper position, his bookstore business will take a massive and fatal blow. Just as he is struggling to maintain his focus, a female customer approaches the desk and places a book down, politely announcing that she would like to pay. Seyoung jumps in surprise, desperately telling himself to focus so he can process her transaction and quickly send her on her way before his secret training partner makes a scene. However, noticing his visibly trembling frame and heavily flushed face, the customer expresses her concern and asks if he is feeling sick. The flustered manager quickly assures her that he is perfectly fine and merely feeling a bit tired, while internally begging this guest to just take her purchase and leave immediately. Unfortunately for our sweating idiot, the female customer is not quite ready to leave. Blushing deeply and looking incredibly nervous, she hesitatingly confesses that she has been watching him for a while, finding him to be exactly her ideal type. She sheepishly asks if she can get his phone number, explaining that he had been incredibly helpful when assisting her with a book earlier. Si-young is completely frozen in utter disbelief, silently cursing his terrible luck and wondering why this confusing confession has to happen at the absolute worst possible moment. Hearing another woman openly show interest in him, Yurina decides to take her training routine to a much more aggressive and intense level. The sudden, overwhelming physical strain causes our poor idiot to let out a panicked, breathless gasp, forcing him to hastily blurt out to the customer that he has already taken. Si-young's painful and desperate groan completely startles the poor customer, who assumes the manager is shouting at her in sheer anger. Looking deeply offended and hurt, she apologizes for bothering him before grabbing her things and sprinting out of the store, leaving Si-young to watch her flee in absolute despair while realizing he cannot even chase after her to clear up the misunderstanding. With the customer finally gone, Si-young's cardio stamina quickly reaches its absolute breaking point under Yurina's relentless training. After wrapping up her exhausting workout session, the cheeky yoga instructor finally sits back, playfully teasing our dazed manager and suggesting that he is far too heartless to the women who try to show him affection. Si-young can only glare down at her with a thoroughly exhausted and red face, breathing heavily as he weakly warns her to never dare pull a sussy stunt like this inside his shop ever again. Eventually, the chaotic day comes to an end, and a calm, quiet night falls over the neighborhood, with the bright full moon and streetlights casting a peaceful glow over the silent streets. Si-young and Yurina are walking through a park at night. The monkey is grumbling about the chaotic events at the bookstore, lecturing Yurina that she must think of the entire situation as a joke and pointing out that she clearly does not understand the disastrous consequences if they were to get caught. Yurina simply flashes a playful grin, admitting with a cheeky smile that she is not actually sorry because his panicked expression was just too cute, confessing that she simply felt like teasing him a bit today. As they stroll further into the dark park, she notes that she brought him here for a walk, and playfully asks if he happens to hate walking, prompting our bumbling manager to quickly admit that he actually enjoys a nice stroll too. As they walk, Yurina locks her arm with his, causing Si-young's hand and arm to repeatedly brush against her side in a highly distracting manner. He finds his mind wandering and trying to ignore the contact while she suddenly shifts the topic back to their earlier conversation. Yurina brings up his previous claim about having someone he already likes, questioning if that statement is actually true. Si-young stops in his tracks, looking remarkably serious, as he confirms that he indeed has someone he loves a whole lot, adding that if his actions caused her any misunderstandings, he sincerely wishes to apologize. Yurina is temporarily taken aback by his unexpected honesty, but she quickly bursts into a fit of giggles. She teases him for being such a naive little potato, asking if he honestly believed she was planning to ask him out. To set the record straight, Yurina proudly explains that she only enjoys temporary flings and actually claims to dislike humanity as a whole, though she quickly adds that Si-young is a special exception because she genuinely likes him quite a bit. Growing increasingly curious and sussy, she leans in and asks about the mystery woman who somehow manages to train his muscles even better than she does, playfully demanding to know if this secret partner is prettier than her. Si-young is left sweating profusely, silently reflecting on her sheer audacity and noting that she is putting him in an incredibly tight spot. While he internally admits to himself that his beloved sister-in-law is definitely prettier, he keeps that realization to himself as Yurina commands him to answer her question very carefully. Si-young can only offer a nervous laugh, quietly wondering why on earth she is pushing the issue so intensely. However, their playful banter is suddenly cut short when Si-young freezes in absolute shock upon spotting a familiar figure across the street. Right there under the streetlights, he recognizes his older brother, Si-jun, standing sussily beside a black luxury sedan. Si-young stares in complete disbelief, silently wondering what on earth his brother could possibly be doing out at such a late hour instead of being fast asleep at home. Yurina observes his reaction and quickly deduces that if that is indeed his older brother, then he must be the husband of Si-young's lovely sister-in-law. Before they can process the situation, a woman wearing an elegant red dress emerges and bows politely to Si-jun, who cautiously scans his surroundings before slipping into the car with her and driving away. Looking at his bewildered face, Yurina asks if he is thinking the exact same thing she is thinking. Realizing the sheer gravity of what he just witnessed, Seyoung frantically declares that they have no choice but to follow his brother to see what is truly going on, and Yurina readily agrees to join him on this chaotic investigation. Shortly after, their pursuit leads them straight to a towering luxury building known as the Class Hotel. Inside the bright lobby, Sejun and the mysterious woman in the red dress are busy checking in at the front desk, completely oblivious to their pursuers. Seyoung and Yurina manage to sneak inside and settle onto the lobby couches, wearing a pair of dark sunglasses as a remarkably silly and obvious disguise. As they watch the two suspects walk toward the elevator, Seyoung is gripped by absolute disbelief, struggling to accept the reality that his brother just checked into a gym with an entirely different woman. Yurina finds the unfolding drama highly interesting, prompting our frustrated manager to grumble that her presence here is completely useless anyway, since she does not even know his brother. Still, Seyoung's focus remains locked on the woman in the red dress, folding his arms in deep thought as a sudden realization hits him. He silently reflects that he has definitely seen her somewhere before, desperately trying to figure out who this mystery companion could possibly be. Breaking his deep concentration, Yurina suddenly grabs his wrist with a firm grip, urgently telling him that there is absolutely no time to waste and declaring that they need to follow them quickly to see the truth for themselves. Back in the lobby, our hopeful idiot of a manager desperately tries to rationalize the situation, suggesting to Yurina that they might just be misunderstanding things since it is technically possible to have important business meetings inside a gym. Yurina merely looks at him with a highly skeptical expression, silently questioning if he honestly believes his brother checked into a luxury suite just to discuss business logistics. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, the clever yoga teacher approaches the front desk, politely asking the receptionist if they can book a room directly adjacent to the one his brother's party just checked into. Shortly after, they make their way up to the quiet hallway. Yurina leads him to their door, explaining that this is the room they will be using while pointing out that the room directly across from them belongs to his brother. She steps inside, softly advising him to tread carefully so they do not make any noise and blow their cover. Stepping into the luxurious room, Seyoung feels a heavy weight settle on his chest. He paces around the room, struggling to process the devastating reality that a modest, dependable family man like his older brother could actually be having a sussy connection, heartlessly ditching Seyoung's devoted sister-in-law to engage in conditioning training behind her back. Just as he is lost in his heavy thoughts, a series of faint, highly rhythmic and breathless sounds of vigorous exercise begin echoing clearly through the thin walls from the room across the hall. Yurina gasps in sheer shock, quickly covering her mouth with her hands as she realizes Seyoung's worst suspicions were entirely correct. Listening to the unmistakable sounds of high-intensity endurance training, she notes with deep concern that Seyoung's poor sister-in-law would be absolutely devastated if she were to ever find out about her husband's secret workouts. Looking incredibly solemn, Seyoung agrees that they absolutely must keep this a complete secret between the two of them, noting that his sister-in-law is far too fragile to handle such immense pain. Yurina softly looks at him and quietly agrees, confirming that she fully understands the gravity of the situation. Exhausted by the sheer drama of the night, Seyoung flops heavily onto the edge of the bed, letting out a deep, weary sigh. As the relentless, sussy echoes of his brother's intense cardiovascular routine continue to drift through the wall, he holds his head in utter disbelief, quietly questioning what on earth his life has turned into. Meanwhile, the constant, rhythmic noises begin to have a noticeable effect on Yurina, whose cheeks turn a deep, warm shade of pink as she stands by the bed, in silent contemplation. Feeling highly flustered and completely overwhelmed by the intense atmosphere, Yurina sheepishly addresses Seyoung, admitting that while she knows her request is a bit outrageous given the circumstances, hearing those passionate training sounds next door is making her feel incredibly strange. She slowly reaches to check her cardio meter, wearing her jacket to show just how worked up she has gotten from the heavy tension. Locking her gaze onto Seyoung, she asks how he feels about their current situation, playfully suggesting that since the location is already absolutely perfect, they should probably put it to good use in training. Feeling equally suffocated by the heavy, sussy air in the room, our dazed monkey lets out a weary chuckle, privately reflecting that, since they are already stuck here, they might as well loosen up by engaging in some vigorous cardiovascular training of their own. Smiling subtly, Seyoung agrees that it sounds like a fantastic plan, casually instructing her to go ahead and get ready for the exercise on her own. Yurina looks back at him in mild surprise, fully prepared to kick off their own private workout session as the chaotic night takes an even wilder turn. Later, walking down the brightly lit hotel corridor, Seyoung reflects on how silly it would be to leave a gym like this without even trying some of its beverages. This thirsty idiot decides a quick drink run is exactly what he needs to clear his head after all the high-intensity drama. As he makes his way down the hall, his eyes land on a woman standing in front of a bright vending machine, quietly inserting some coins. Looking down at her elegant high heels and stylish dress, Seyoung pauses, wondering if she is also out to grab a refreshing drink. Walking up next to her, he catches her complaining under her breath about how the gym service is an absolute mess, prompting her to realize she needs to buy her drinks quickly and head back to her room as fast as possible. However, as Seyoung gets a closer look at her profile in the bright light, his eyes suddenly widen in complete and utter shock. In a jarring moment of clarity, our stunned bookstore manager realizes that this woman standing right next to him is the exact same mysterious companion who checked into the gym with his older brother. Watching the woman bend over to grab her drink from the vending machine, Seyoung's mind remains in a state of complete disbelief, reflecting on how this is the very woman his brother is cheating with, and noting that he never expected to run into her in a place like this. The woman cradles several cans of juice in her arms, looking down and wondering if this selection will be enough to satisfy their needs for now. Seyoung silently notes that she certainly bought a massive amount of drinks, quickly realizing with a jolt that every single can she chose is mango flavored, which is his older brother's absolute favorite drink. The longer he stares at her, the more a strange sense of familiarity washes over him, leaving our clueless idiot to desperately rack his brain to recall where on earth he has encountered her pretty face before. Just as she is turning around, one of the mango cans slips from her grasp and rolls right over to Seyoung's foot. She sheepishly asks him for a helping hand, prompting Seyoung to quickly bend down and retrieve the can, reassuring her that it is no trouble at all, while internally reflecting on the absolute madness of this entire situation. He politely hands the beverage back to her, and she warmly thanks him for the help. However, as she looks closely at his face, she suddenly pauses, curiously asking if he is, by any chance, An Seyoung. Our flustered manager flinches in absolute surprise, utterly shocked that she somehow knows his full name. She beams with excitement, confirming that he is indeed Seyoung, leaving him completely baffled as he politely asks if they have met somewhere before. She cheerfully giggles and asks if he really does not remember her, pointing out that they even used to share meals together back in the day. She marvels at how he has not changed even a tiny bit, playfully remarking that he still possesses that handsome bad boy face, leaving Seyoung to stutter in confusion that he has absolutely no idea what she means. Seeing his blank expression, she lets out a disappointed sigh, complaining that his lack of memory really sucks. Seyoung strokes his chin in deep thought, desperately wondering who on earth she could possibly be, and questioning how he could have possibly forgotten such a remarkably pretty face. To jog his memory, she smiles slyly and asks how he feels about her appearance now, slowly untying her ponytail to let her long hair cascade down. Striking a playful pose, she asks if he finally remembers her now that her hair is loose. A massive wave of realization suddenly hits Seyoung, and his eyes pop open in absolute shock as he gasps her name, finally recognizing her as Han Seo Ah Seonbae. A sudden memory flashes in his mind, reminding him that she and his older brother were actually passionate college sweethearts during their university days. Seyoung sheepishly scratches his head, admitting that he genuinely could not recognize her with her hair tied up in that ponytail. Seo Ah giggles and explains that she has to maintain a neat and tidy look since she works in a professional office environment now. Trying to play it cool, Seyoung politely remarks that even with her hair tied up, she still looks as exceptionally beautiful as ever. She warmly thanks him for the sweet compliment, leaving our deeply conflicted manager to stare at her in silent worry, questioning if this woman truly does not comprehend the incredibly messy and chaotic situation she has gotten herself into. Standing in the corridor, Seyoung's mind remains in utter turmoil, marveling at how Seoa can act so casual and comfortable around him when she is actively seeing his older brother. Seoa smiles warmly, noting that it has been a very long time since she last heard him address her as Seonbae, and admitting that it feels remarkably good. Seyoung silently agrees that it really has been a while, feeling a sudden wave of nostalgia as if he has been transported right back to his college days. However, his pleasant trip down memory lane is quickly cut short when she leans in close, sussily suggesting that he seems to be visiting the gym tonight with his girlfriend. Our flustered manager instantly panics, awkwardly stammering that yes, his girlfriend is indeed here with him. As he looks at her, Seyoung silently notes that her entire vibe feels completely different and far more mature compared to their university years. Seoa gazes at him playfully, teasingly remarking that he is all grown up now and acting highly amused that he is staying at a gym with a girlfriend. She playfully accuses him of treating her like a kid when he is actually not that young anymore, giggling softly as she declares that he is still just as cute as he always was. Desperate to escape this incredibly awkward and dangerous conversation, Seyoung decides it is time to put an end to the teasing. He suggests that if they are finished catching up, she should probably be on her merry way, gently placing his hands on her shoulders to guide her away from the vending machine. Seoa giggles at his flustered reaction, asking if he is seriously upset because she teased him a bit, before bidding him a warm farewell and promising she will see him around. Left standing completely alone in the hallway, Se-young lets out a massive, trembling sigh of relief, weakly reflecting on how incredibly intense and stressful that sudden encounter actually was. Meanwhile, back in Sejun's gym room, the dense older brother is sitting wearing a jacket in bed checking his phone when the door clicks open. He looks up and casually demands to know what took her so long to return, prompting a smiling Seoa to lie smoothly that she simply bumped into an old acquaintance she hadn't seen in a while, quickly dismissing his curiosity by claiming it was just some random person. Later that night, back at the quiet brick house, Se-young sits in the dark living room holding a white mug, completely unable to get the chaotic events of the film out of his head. He paces around the room and sits heavily on the sofa, desperately wondering how on earth Sejun and Seoa could have possibly reconnected when they had not spoken or even called each other once since their college graduation. Clutching his forehead in frustration, he laments that no matter how many times he analyzes the situation, the fact that Seoa is the one his brother is seeing remains incredibly bothersome and stressful. Suddenly, a soft rustle draws his attention as his sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, steps into the room wearing a pair of pink-striped pajamas. She asks him if everything is all right, noting that he has seemed remarkably distant and lost in thought ever since he arrived home. Trying to hide his immense guilt, Se-young quickly puts on a reassuring smile, insisting that he is perfectly fine and there is absolutely nothing for her to worry about. However, his heart begins to hammer wildly in his chest when his gaze lands on her cozy outfit. Noting his sudden silence, Lee Ryong blushes sheepishly and asks him nervously if the pajamas look strange on her, explaining that she wanted to try wearing something different tonight. Our flustered hero quickly raises both thumbs and enthusiastically assures her that they do not look weird at all, declaring that they actually suit her perfectly, which leaves his lovely sister-in-law smiling warmly in absolute relief. Admiring her cozy new look, Se-young silently reflects on how incredibly cute his sister-in-law looks in her pajamas. However, the lighthearted mood quickly shifts when Lee Ryong notes that her husband, Sejun, is running exceptionally late tonight. Our secret-keeping idiot instantly panics, sweating profusely as he is forced to sit in awkward silence, acutely aware that his brother is currently checked into a luxury gym room with Seo-ah Seon-bae. As Se-young hangs his head in deep distress over his brother's secret connection, Lee Ryong watches him with growing concern. Lee Ryong gently complains that he keeps making that sad, distant face again and again, asking him gently why he keeps wearing such a troubled expression. She softly admits that while she will not press him for the specific reasons behind his heavy heart, seeing him look so downcast makes her feel incredibly sad as well. Hearing her sweet confession, Se-young looks up with wide eyes, deeply touched by how much she genuinely cares for his emotional well-being. Deciding that they have had enough of these heavy, depressing thoughts, Se-young suddenly takes charge of the situation, causing a startled Lee Ryong to let out a quiet gasp of surprise. Looking deeply into her eyes, he calls out her name softly, prompting her to whisper a quiet response. He then asks her if she wants him to show her exactly how he can make her happy right now, to which she blushes deeply and softly agrees. The sister-in-law quietly asks what exactly he is planning to do next, as the two of them prepare to ease their shared loneliness with a comforting and private fat-burning cardio session. Wrapping up their session, Se-young looks at his sister-in-law and softly asks if she happens to be free tomorrow. Lee Ryong looks back in surprise, quietly questioning his sudden invitation. The scene transitions to the next afternoon outside a bustling shopping mall. A white car pulls up to the curb, and as they step out, Lee Ryong curiously asks if they are actually going to the cinema today. Se-young warmly explains that he simply wanted to watch his favorite movie with her, prompting an excited Lee Ryong to admit that it has been a very long time since she last visited a movie theater. She beams with joy, thanking Se-young sweetly for going out of his way to bring her here today. As they stroll toward the entrance, Se-young playfully notes that they look exactly like real partners. Feeling a sudden wave of courage, the dummy asks if he can hold her hand, gently reaching out to lock his fingers with hers. Lee Ryong's heart beats rapidly as she blushes, quietly reflecting on how incredibly warm and comforting Se-young's hands feel. Inside the dark theater, Se-young looks over at his companion, finding her absolutely adorable as she happily sniffling and dabs her eyes during the movie's emotional end. Seizing the perfect opportunity, he slowly reaches out and grabs her hand. After the movie, the two stroll down a vibrant street, still holding hands. Se-young's eyes land on a colorful claw machine, and he playfully leads her over to try their luck. With a bit of skill, he successfully grabs a cute stuffed fox toy, handing it over to a delighted Lee Ryong. She cradles the plush toy in her arms and bursts into a bright, joyful laugh, looking happier than she has in a very long time. However, their pleasant outing is suddenly interrupted when raindrops begin plopping onto Se-young's shoulder. He quickly notes that it is raining out of nowhere, realizing that the sudden downpour was not predicted in the weather forecast at all. Lee Ryong points out that they do not even have an umbrella and are about to get completely soaked, prompting Seung to urge her to run straight for the parking lot. They scramble through the rain and climb into the safety of the car, breathing heavily as Seung runs a hand through his wet hair, sighing that they got completely drenched. Looking down at her soaked attire, Lee Ryong sheepishly notes that her jacket is a total mess now. Our thoughtful hero immediately proposes turning on the car heater so they can dry off a little faster. His sister-in-law lets out a frustrated sigh, complaining that she is completely soaked all the way down to her cardio clothes. She pulls at her clinging, wet white shirt to adjust it, leaving a highly flustered Seung to gulp nervously as the damp fabric clings sussily to her form. Seung clears his throat and suggests they head home once their clothes dry a bit, while his blushing sister-in-law quietly agrees, still adjusting her wet shirt in the warm cabin. Sitting in the cozy warmth of the car, Lee Ryong notices Seung's intense gaze, silently wondering why on earth he is staring at her so intensely. However, her confusion quickly turns to absolute shock when her eyes wander on him, noticing his 100% charged electric workout tools. Seung covers the tools in panic, completely mortified. Groaning in sheer embarrassment, Seung thinks to himself how utterly humiliating this is, lamenting that he feels exactly like a disgusting guy. Lee Ryong sits in silence with her heart beating rapidly, her face flushed a deep, fiery red. But just as the awkward silence threatens to stretch, she decides to take matters into her own hands. To Seung's absolute surprise, she suddenly starts a calorie-burning session. A few days pass, and the scene transitions to a quiet night at the two-story brick house. Walking into the dining room, Seung's eyes widen as he spots an incredibly delicious and massive seafood feast laid out across the table, prompting him to curiously ask his sister-in-law what the special occasion is for such a grand spread. Lee Ryong turns to him with a bright smile, explaining that her husband, Sejun, has actually invited a guest over for dinner tonight. Seung blinks in confusion, questioning the sudden news of an unexpected guest, which she cheerfully confirms. She explains that this particular visitor was apparently a massive help on an important project at Sejun's office, but before she can explain any further, the loud chime of the front doorbell echoes through the house. Lee Ryong happily notes that they have arrived right on time, rushing off to the front door to deliver a warm and welcoming greeting. Entering the hallway, Sejun proudly introduces his companion, announcing to his wife that this is his dedicated subordinate from work. However, the moment Seung looks up to greet the guest, his heart practically stops in his chest. Standing right beside his older brother, dressed in a neat office shirt and skirt, is none other than Han Seo-ah. She politely bows and introduces herself, while a completely oblivious Lee Ryong warmly welcomes her, cheerfully announcing that she has already set the table and urging everyone to hurry up and eat first. Seung is left standing completely frozen in absolute horror. As he stares blankly at his brother's mistress standing right inside his own living room, his heart hammers furiously against his ribs, and this secret-keeping idiot silently screams in absolute panic, desperately wondering why on earth this exact person has suddenly showed up at his family's home. Han Seo-ah stands gracefully at the entrance of the house, letting out a soft chuckle as she greets Seung and notes how remarkably long it has been since they last spoke. Both Seung and his sister-in-law, Lee Ryong, are completely frozen in utter surprise by her sudden appearance, with Seung only managing a quiet gasp of shock. Seo-ah steps closer, leaning in as she casually reflects on how they have not seen each other since their college graduation days. Looking him up and down, she boldly praises Seung, commenting that he has seriously glowed up and become incredibly good-looking over the years. This flattering remark immediately sends our clueless hero's mind into a tailspin, leaving him desperately wondering why on earth his brother's mistress has suddenly shown up at his family's home of all places. As Seung stands there processing the shock, he notices his older brother, Sejun, hovering quietly in the background. Seung silently notes that Seo-ah has completely left out the fact that they ran into each other at the hotel a few days ago, leaving him to wonder if she is simply being considerate of his secret or playing a much more dangerous game. Quickly shaking off his confusion, the young man scratches his head and politely returns the greeting, agreeing that it really has been a long time since college, and returning the compliment by telling her she has also gotten much prettier. Seo-ah beams with joy and thanks him warmly, completely ignoring the thick tension in the room. This friendly exchange catches Lee Ryong completely off guard, and she curiously chimes in to ask if they actually know each other. She explains that Sejun had only introduced Seo-ah as his dedicated subordinate from the office, prompting Seo-ah to clarify that all three of them actually knew each other back in their university club. Just as Seung's dense older brother slips off his shoes, he casually announces that he is far too exhausted and is heading straight to his room to change first. Lee Ryong calls after her husband, gently urging him to hurry back down so they can all enjoy the freshly prepared meal together. Watching his retreating figure, Seo-ah dryly mutters about how incredibly sensitive Sejun is, while Seong silently agrees that his brother is visibly upset about something. Soon after, the four of them settle around the dining table, with Seong and Seo-ah sitting directly across from the married couple. Despite the incredibly heavy and uncomfortable atmosphere, Seo-ah happily digs into the seafood hot pot, cheerfully praising the delicious flavor and calling Lee Ryong an absolutely incredible chef. While Lee Ryong blushes sheepishly and admits that the constant compliments are quite embarrassing, Seong can only stare at the mistress in absolute disbelief. He finds himself completely unable to figure out her real intentions, silently questioning why on earth a woman who is actively having a connection with his brother would dare to step foot inside his family's home where his wife resides. Trying to keep the conversation going, Lee Ryong politely asks how she and Sejun originally met, and Seo-ah casually explains that he was simply her upperclassman in college, though she playfully complains that he is now her strict boss at work. Seong dryly reflects that, as expected, she is carefully hiding the crucial detail that they used to be passionate college lovers. Hoping to break the awkward silence, Seong playfully suggests that having a familiar face as a boss must actually be quite fun, but Seo-ah immediately shifts the focus back to him. She boldly declares that her boss was merely an excuse to visit today, announcing that her true intention was actually to catch up with Seong. Before Seong can even react, Seo-ah suddenly lunges forward and grabs her hand. The sudden and intense proximity catches our bumbling bookstore manager completely off guard, leaving him blushing furiously as he desperately struggles to maintain his balance. He silently grumbles that they were never even remotely close in college, finding her sudden display of affection completely absurd. Seong's mind spirals into further confusion as he feels the heavy weight of her pressing against him, and he silently begins to wonder what on earth his older brother is thinking by allowing this to happen. Watching them with a forced smile, Lee Ryong asks if they were truly that close back in the day, which Seo-ah enthusiastically confirms. Unable to witness his mistress acting so close to his younger brother any longer, a thoroughly annoyed Sejun sharply slams his chopsticks onto the wooden table. Standing up abruptly, the older brother coldly announces that he is simply too tired to eat and will be leaving first. As a startled Lee Ryong questions his sudden departure, Seong finally realizes the terrible truth behind the situation. He recalls Sejun's earlier excuse about bringing Seo-ah over simply because she claimed she wanted to see Seong, realizing that his older brother completely used him as a convenient shield to invite his mistress into the house. Sejun coldly bids them to enjoy the rest of their evening before walking into his bedroom and firmly shutting the door behind him. Left alone with the guest, a flustered Lee Ryong quickly apologizes to Seo-ah for her husband's incredibly rude behavior, but Seo-ah casually dismisses her worries. She reassures the host that it is perfectly fine since she sees him acting like that at work every single day anyway. This casual remark instantly catches the wife's attention, and she looks up in absolute surprise, admitting that Sejun is never that cold or sensitive when he is at home. Sensing an opportunity to stir up some serious trouble, Seo-ah leans in with a sly smile and asks if she would like to hear more about how her husband behaves at the office, to which an eager Lee Ryong quickly and enthusiastically agrees. At the dinner table, Seo-ah inquires if there is any alcohol available to accompany the food, quickly transitioning the evening into a casual drinking session filled with snacks and soda. As the night progresses, she entertains Lee Ryong with various stories from the office, laughing about a dramatic incident where documents went flying everywhere in the department. Lee Ryong listens with absolute delight, finding the stories highly amusing while Seo-ah comfortably settles onto the couch, having removed her white outer shirt to reveal a light jacket underneath. Sitting nearby, Seong watches the two of them with a completely deadpan expression, silently reflecting on how it has already been over 2 hours and noting what an incredibly odd pairing these two women make. Our anxious idiot quietly sips his soda from a green can, unable to shake off the sheer awkwardness of the situation as he observes how surprisingly well his sister-in-law and his brother's mistress are getting along. Seong's eyes occasionally wander towards Seo-ah, who quickly notices his lingering gaze and wonders what is on his mind. Looking at the clock, Seo-ah casually remarks that it seems to have gotten quite late, prompting Lee Ryong to agree as she realizes the time. Out of genuine concern for her guest's safety, Lee Ryong points out that it is far too dangerous for a woman to travel alone at this hour, warmly proposing that Seo-ah simply sleep over for the night. Seo-ah happily accepts the invitation, noting that she has the entire following day off from work. Seo-ah sweetens her acceptance by expressing her excitement over getting to taste Lee Ryong's delicious breakfast in the morning, leaving a flattered host to giggle and thank her warmly. Sitting in absolute silence, Si-young's heart begins to race with anxiety as he nervously questions whether it is truly appropriate to let this woman sleep under the same roof as his family. Before he can stress any further, Lee Ryong suggests that they should probably all head to bed since it is past 11 o'clock, explaining that they have a perfectly comfortable empty guest room prepared for Seo-ah to use. With everyone retiring for the night, the young bookstore manager finds himself completely unable to relax. Desperate for a breath of fresh air to calm his hyperactive mind, Si-young quietly slips out of the house and wanders into the quiet yard, leaning his back against the brick wall under the cool night sky. Standing outside, Si-young tries to piece together the mistress's sudden visit, deducing that she must have realized he had followed her and Si-jun to the gym a few days prior. He silently concludes that she has come here specifically to figure out whether or not he has already exposed her secret relationship to Lee Ryong. However, despite his heavy worries, the young man's silly mind cannot help but drift back to the moment she had playfully hugged him earlier in the evening. As he foolishly reflects on how sussy her hands felt a sudden, embarrassing desire to experience it again, a sharp voice suddenly cuts through the darkness, directly asking him what exactly he is so eager to touch. Si-young flinches in absolute horror, looking up to see Seo-ah leaning playfully over the metal gate. Frantically trying to compose himself, a startled Si-young asks his college senior what on earth she is doing awake so late at night. Seo-ah only delivers a playful smile, teasingly asking if she has interrupted his sussy thoughts. Si-young quickly stammers that it is nothing important, but his eyes suddenly widen as he realizes she has somehow managed to find him outside. Seo-ah explains that she had been struggling to fall asleep when she heard a noise downstairs, and after witnessing him heading out the door, she decided to follow him into the yard. Si-young can only offer a sheepish acknowledgement, noting that he was also having trouble sleeping. Stepping away, the disgusting woman playfully presses the issue, demanding to know what it is he wanted to do so badly. Our completely flustered idiot quickly backpedals, desperately insisting that he meant absolutely nothing by his silent muttering. However, as he looks at her up close, Si-young's eyes helplessly wander down, realizing with a sudden jolt that she has borrowed his oversized white button-up shirt as pajamas. Watching her stand before him under the dim moonlight, he silently notes how incredibly beautiful she looks in his clothes, leaving our struggling hero to nervously gulp as he tries his absolute best to maintain his composure in the quiet night air. Standing out in the chilly yard, Si-young gently places his hands on Seo-ah's shoulders, warmly advising her that they should head back inside before she catches a cold in the freezing night air. Seo-ah slowly tilts her head back to look up at him, admitting with a soft sigh that she always has an incredibly difficult time falling asleep whenever she stays at someone else's home. She then looks directly into his eyes and asks him if he would be willing to put her to bed, teasingly suggesting that she will only be able to sleep well if he personally takes her to her room. This sussy request instantly sends Si-young's heart hammering against his ribs, leaving our bumbling hero completely paralyzed in utter confusion as the cheeky mistress leans her weight back against his hands. Unable to resist her playful persistence, the young bookstore manager eventually guides her back inside and quietly opens the door to the guest room. As they step into the dimly lit room, Seo-ah walks barefoot toward the window, looking out at the darkness and softly remarking on how beautiful the night sky is from here. Si-young immediately delivers a stern, whispering warning, reminding her that she absolutely must keep her voice down because his brother and sister-in-law are both exceptionally light sleepers. Seo-ah casually agrees to be quiet, walking further into the room with a sussy smile on her face, while Si-young watches her from behind. However, as Si-young observes her standing by the window, his entire mind is suddenly struck by a wave of absolute horror and embarrassment. Looking closely at her silhouette under the dim light, our clueless manager has a shocking and highly awkward realization about the distinct lack of jacket beneath his oversized white shirt. He stands there completely frozen in sheer panic, sweating profusely as his mind struggles to process this highly unexpected development, leaving him to silently curse his terrible luck for getting caught in yet another chaotic situation. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, the warm glow of a bedside lamp softly illuminates the quiet room where Si-jun and Lee Ryong are fast asleep under the covers. After a short while, Lee Ryong slowly wakes up from her deep slumber, sitting up in bed and sleepily realizing that she is incredibly thirsty and desperately needs a cold drink of water. Leaving her snoring husband resting peacefully on his back, she quietly slips out from under the blankets and makes her way toward the bedroom exit. She gently nudges her door open and steps barefoot into the dark, quiet hallway, hoping to sneak down to the kitchen without waking anyone up. However, just as she takes a few steps down the corridor, her ears catch a distinct, sharp clicking sound echoing through the silent house. Lee Ryong freezes in absolute surprise, her heart beating rapidly as she pauses to investigate. Looking down the hallway, she wonders what could possibly be causing such a strange noise at this late hour. Her gaze is instantly drawn toward the guest room, where a bright sliver of light is leaking clearly through the slightly open door. Filled with deep confusion and growing suspicion, she slowly makes her way toward the room to see exactly what is unfolding inside.